Konnichiwa, minasan. Watashi no namae wa Muteki Sensay desu. Kyou wa Sensay ni sasete kudasai. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu. Meow meow. Hi Ren. Hello says B. You were asking what the next subtool was? Let's check actually. Because I have forgotten. Not gonna lie. Here you go. What's next? Oops, it's behind. Get to design a free emote. One of the free, I still have like a slot for a free emote. You get to design one if we make it to 2 more subs. Hi Red Bandit, how are you doing? Let me move a few things around. I have not really used this room in a while, so the arrangement of things is a little off. It should be better. Let's try it again. There, now it goes over. Perfect. Welcome everyone to this evening's class. As part of our end of August 500 milestone Subathon, we will have a game design crash course tonight. So I hope you all are ready for this. Finished my 2-week streaming celebration for nice. Let's go Red Bandit. Congrats for 200. I'm a lurk by the way because I'm still working. Go ahead, no problem. Your sprite is not Sylveon. It's supposed to be Sylveon. Let me correct that, Testy. You should be Sylveon. Why are you not Sylveon? Why are you Swadloon? Did my... There we go. It should be okay now. Now you're Sylveon. Nyakasen should be Swadloon. Anyway. Here go, Sylveon. Anong gen na pwede? Up until all. Yeah, you can be anyone. Do you want me to change you to someone else, Ren? Go ahead. Let me know. Can you be Alolan Vulpix? Let me check if I have that. I believe I do, but let's check. Ah, shoot. Why can't I change? There you go. Do I have Alolan form? Oh, I probably don't. I don't have the Alolan forms, unfortunately. Why don't I have Alolan form? I should. Oh, exams, huh? Well, all the best in your exams tomorrow, Red Bandit. I hope you get a good grade in your exams. I know you can manage. I'm pretty sure you can. There's no Alolan Vulpix. Hi. If I change it to Vulpix, do I have options for that? No, I don't. You're just Vulpix now. What if you cry? Oh, wait. I'm not sure why I don't have Alolan Vulpix. I should, but I don't know why I don't. Okay, I'm gonna check that later, Ren. I'm pretty sure there should be Alolan Vulpix. Math is in it, so it's kind of fine, but not at the same time. I mean, that's math, right? That's what math is. We like math, but sometimes math hates us. I'm going to check Ren later. After stream, I'm gonna check if the Alolan forms are available. I'm pretty sure they should be, and I'm pretty sure I downloaded until the Alolan forms, but unfortunately, I don't think I have that. Okay, so are we ready for... Oh, bomb, you can't do the bomb. Who are you, Red Bandit, by the way? Who did you become? What is this? Oh, you're Clough. It's Clough. He's Clough. Tampupu. Don't be Tampupu. You don't want to be Pupu. You know, don't be Pupu. Better be shit than be Pupu. Wait, what? I'll check later, Ren. I'll make sure I'll have Alolan Vulpix. I don't actually know why I don't have Alolan Vulpix. I should. Speaking of Vulpix, speaking of Pokemon, shall we start with tonight's lesson? I am both nervous and excited about this because, as you know, I always say I am Sensei online but also Sensei in life. And in life, this is one of the subjects that I actually teach. So you'd think I should be ready and prepared for this, but you never know when it comes to streaming, right? You never know. There's a few things I need to also... There's one more reason why I'm doing this. There's a few things I want to find out if this is something that is possible to do. I don't know if it will be... Usually, if I'm doing this in real life, I will be banking on interactions from my students. But, hey, you are my students now, so please do. If you have questions, raise them in chat. I'm curious. That's why even if I'm busy, I came to watch tonight. Sali ako, wait. No, just raise your questions in chat and I will answer. I'm used to this. You know, it's come full circle, actually. It's come full circle. Like when the pandemic and the lockdown started, we were all forced to conduct our class online. Yeah, we were all forced to conduct our classes online. And I looked to streamers, I looked to VTubers for inspiration on how to remain interactive despite the despite the asymmetry of communication modality. Ay, ang lalim. Asymmetry of communication modality. So what that simply means is I can talk to you in real time, but I have to wait for you to respond in chat. So I look to VTubers and streamers for inspiration. How do they manage? How do they do it? And now, 1 year later, 1 year of streaming later, I get to teach while I stream, and I get to use what I learned from teaching online and feed it back to streaming. Such a full circle moment. It's the circle of life. Anyway, shall we start? Again, if you do have any questions, feel free to raise them in chat and I will answer as soon as I can. So, for tonight's stream, we will be talking about game design and designing games. And you see, here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. There are many ways with which we could design games. We could intentionally design them, and actually, most of the games you know are intentionally designed. Pwede po mag-sit insert anytime. I actually do have a policy in my real life classes that as long as there's a seat open, feel free to sit in. I am not stingy. If you want to learn, just take a seat and listen to me. May incentive ba? Oh yeah! By the way, there is a little bit of an incentive. if you are part of Muteki U and you are attending class tonight, you will be given a certificate. Manesan Chloe will be preparing. These certificates will just... we're supposed to have a Google form or something ready to collect attendance, but I'm not sure if that will be ready in time. Anyway, I'll probably just take note of who's here. We'll check the VOD. Whoever is present and is in our Discord server will give you certificates of attendance. Hey, hello. Oh God. I still cannot pronounce your name properly. Noaki Ray Noel Chan. Hello. Pwede ba yan? Pwede ba yan saan? What? You can jump. Yeah. If there's a star floating, you can jump and you can take it. So, anyway, going back. There are a million ways with which you can design games. There are many different philosophies, many different theories, many different approaches in terms of game design, right? Most of the games that we're familiar with were engineered specifically, right? It was tailor-made to cater to particular demographics. It was made specifically to be entertaining for a subset of the audience. But some, especially the really old games, evolved through generations of what we call the folk process. So, I guess what I'm trying to say here is there is no wrong way to approach game design. There are certainly inefficient ways, however. And the approach that I will be advocating for in tonight's class is, in my opinion, at least in my opinion, one of the more efficient ways to make sure that your game will be successful. Alright, so are you ready for this? So, we will be exploring what I would consider as a player experience-centered design philosophy. Will this be on the exam? We don't have exams in game design classes, blank. But we do have practical activities, so... Just make sure that you take notes and you listen. Paano kung ito yung nasagot ko sa midterm exam? Oh my gosh. Ren, please. So, in route to this player experience-centered design philosophy, we would need to learn a few classic game design theories as well. So we'll be covering a few classic theories in tonight's class before we actually go in to this player experience focused design philosophy. So are we ready? Here are the topics that I will be talking about. I don't know how long this will actually take. I have like 80 or something slides. So I hope you are ready for this lecture. We'll first discuss what actually counts as a game. Hala, sir, sorry late. It's okay. We have barely started. Go take a seat and listen, alright? Sabi raw po kasi ni Sensay Moteki, game design daw po kaya nasagot ko. Oh my God. Walks through the back door. I mean, when I actually conduct my classes, I don't mind if students come in late as long as they are courteous and respectful to everyone else in the room. So if you want to enter by the back door, no problem. If you want to enter by the front door, just make sure you're being courteous, right? You're not drawing attention to yourself. Walks in front of Sensei. See? That's what I'm trying to say. Anyway, so we'll first discuss what counts actually as a game. Have you ever wondered, I use the word game a lot in day-to-day life. It's such a ubiquitous thing, games. Everyone plays games. Have I ever actually wondered what is a game? Have you ever thought about what counts as a game? What even doesn't count as a game? So we'll discuss that first. And then we'll talk about some foundational theories in game design. See? Is life a game? Mike, what is it? Why are you raising your hand? Do you have a question? Ay, sorry, akala ko recite na. You have something to say though? Go ahead. No problems, no worries. You know the rules and so do I. Speaking of knowing the rules, blank. You're right on the mark about something. If I can give you points, I'll give you points. We'll get there eventually, but there's something about rules and how it connects to games that sets it apart from something else. We'll get there. Next, after discussing games and theories, I want to shed light on this player experience centered design philosophy. So we'll talk about PX. PX stands, of course, for player experience. And then if we have time, the final part of today's class, we will cover how do we even start making a game. Now, apologies in advance if you were expecting that by the end of today's class, you would be able to make a game, you would know the process on how to make games. I tried. I really did. I tried to cram as much of the content as possible, but it is just impossible. The field of game design and game development, all under the bigger umbrella of game production, is so huge that we can't cover everything in a single session. So if you are interested in a part 2 of this, I mean, why not? We can do this again another time. We can have part 2 if ever. At its core, a game has an end objective and there's like predetermined rules to get to the end objective. Wow! I like that definition, Mike. It's very close to the actual definition of what games are. Is this a Sensay crash course? Exactly. It's just gonna be a crash course. There's so much. Actually, when I was preparing these slides, especially in part 3 PX, I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I had 3 hours to discuss this because there's so much we could learn about it. So if you're interested in a part 2, why not? Why not? We can do a part 2. So, shall we go over first about what counts as a game? Mike's definition of what a game is actually pretty accurate because, there are quote-unquote games that challenge the definition of games. For example, there is a game called Click the Jar where all you do is click on a jar. And after a certain number of clicks, something happens. Some exposition of a deeper story happens. Is that a game? There are some games as well that are well established as games. Nobody would argue that they are games. But if you examine them more closely, it seems like they are not. Case in point, classic Minecraft. Modern day Minecraft, of course, is more like a game because now there is a clear objective, which is the Ender Dragon. But even the Ender Dragon is an optional objective. And if you wind the clock back to early Minecraft, to classic Minecraft, to vanilla Minecraft, where there are no objectives, it's literally just a simulator of mining and crafting, hence the name Minecraft. Is that a game? If you really think about it, is that a game? What even are the rules of Minecraft? What even is the end objective of Minecraft? If Minecraft is a game, should we also consider Microsoft Flight Simulator as a game? See, these are questions that if you really want to go into the field of game design are questions that we need answers to. We need to be able to differentiate what counts as a game and what doesn't. Understandably, this will maybe cause some controversy because it would cause some maybe arguments between you and maybe your friends. Oh, that's a game. No, it's not. According to the definition, it's not. But if we really are interested in the design of games, we have to make these concessions, unfortunately. So, yes, they are games. Microsoft Flight Sim is a game. Well, let's see. So, in discussing the definition of games, we have to differentiate gameful activities against playful activities. So we need to talk about ludus and padia. Ludus means game, and padia means play. And as much as they are related, they are also different. Let's start first with ludus. Like I said, ludus means game. A game is a system in which players engage in what we call artificial conflict. Yes, it's important to denote that the conflict is artificial, defined by rules that results in a quantifiable outcome. So Mike's definition is actually spot on. For the most part, predetermined rules, there's an end objective or an outcome, And I suppose the only thing that's missing is the concept of the artificial conflict, which is very, very important, by the way, when we discuss the definition of games. By the way, this definition comes from Tekin Bass and Zimmerman. I believe their paper's entitled Rules of Play, but I have not. Apologies, I already forgot the actual title. But Tekin Bass and Zimmerman are seasoned professionals in the field of game design. Hello, hello, Panda. Konnichiwa, Panda. Take a seat and listen to teacher tonight, okay? We're talking about game design. I hope this is something interesting to you. Should we hide the timer? It's blocking a little bit of the slides. We'll see if it keeps blocking the slides. If it does, I'll hide the timer, okay? So, Tekin Bass and Zimmerman are seasoned veterans in the field of game design. They have been designing games for decades. And so, it's reasonable to listen to their definition of what games are. And I do agree with this definition of a game. Let's talk about play now. Play is a purposeless, intrinsically motivated human activity without explicit rules. This is by Dorner. Playful activities must be imaginative, pleasurable, but overall artificial. As you can see from both definitions, right? There is a big overlap. There's a huge overlap. In fact, there's only one major difference. I wonder if you can find it. Chat. Chat, can you find the difference? Between Ludus and Padya, I know the wording is slightly different, but can you see what's different between the two? Where is the line between Ludus and Padya? Hello, John. How are you? And exactly, Mike. Indeed, that is the case. The difference are simply the rules. This is why I said a while ago, blank, right? I know you were memeing when you said, I know the rules and you know the rules and so do I. But you're spot on. The difference between game and play is games have rules. Playful activities do not have rules. But as we will see later, they have what I would call as proto-rules. You won't find this in any literature. This is a term that I coined. I'm sure somebody else would have already coined that term in the past. But they call these rules, but not really rules of play, as proto-rules. I was going to say Padya is the action. I was wrong. Padya is play, John. Padya is play and Ludus is game. So when we talk about game and play, we often use the terms Ludus and Padya. Let's do a deep dive of the definition of Ludus, the definition of game, and look at each of these highlighted concepts. Starting with artificiality of the nature of games. Games are artificial in nature. This is something that we probably take for granted when we think about game and its definition. But games are, at the end of the day, artificial, right? No matter how much games try to mimic real-world activities, right? And some games are actually very close to their real-world counterparts. At the end of the day, your gains and your losses are kept within the confines of the game. Any benefit that you earn, any conflict that you start, any pain, any gain, anything of that sort, disappears once you are done playing the game. You can go back to the game again in the future and you could reap the benefits once again, but once you're done playing, you leave behind these pains and these gains, these damage or these benefits. Okay? Imagine if you played, say, Final Fantasy and you got hurt while fighting or engaging an enemy. And then after you play, you notice that, oh my gosh, I'm also wounded in real life, right? It changes the dynamics of games. This is why we play games as an escape with RL stuff. Yeah, it is connected to that, John. It's connected to the idea of playing a game is supposed to be a pleasurable activity. And so it's almost like we're surrendering to the game at that point, and we are essentially pretending to be something else while we are in the game. Once you're done playing, you go back to reality. Yeah, exactly, Panda. That is indeed the case. This is why some literature would call games as purposeless. This is not meant to be a derogatory term, no, by the way. Don't think of it as a negative term. It's just purposeless because when you are playing a game, you're not contributing to your real life successes, if that makes sense, right? This also makes games functionally incomplete. Let's talk about that a little bit. Functional incompleteness. I don't know if you play Master Duel or any sort of TCG simulator on your computer, but when you open packs in Master Duel, it mimics the real-world experience of opening booster packs. But the cards stay within the game. You get the experience of opening packs, so you get part of the function, right? When you open packs, right? It's meant to be this exciting event of, oh, what will I get? What will I open? Will I get a secret rare? Will I get a galaxy foil or whatever you call it? A royal rare, I guess, is how you call it in Yu-Gi-Oh! But in the digital game version, those cards stay within the game. After you're done playing, it's no longer there. So there is incompleteness in its function. Part of the function is there, but it's not complete. Okay? Now, one might argue, isn't Yu-Gi-Oh! The board game also a game? That's true as well. If you look at the rules of Yu-Gi-Oh! The board game, when you deal damage to your enemy when you attack, for example, with your monsters, your opponent does not get hurt. Their life total goes down, but they don't get physically hurt. This brings to light a few questionable games and a few questionable events as well. Like, for example, what if you get so frustrated while playing Yu-Gi-Oh! That you punch your opponent in the face? Yeah. See? What if you punch the opponent in the face? What if the rules of the quote-unquote game say you punch that person in the face? Is it still a game? In my opinion, it shouldn't be considered a game anymore because there are now real-world consequences. It's no longer an escape. Hence, this is why I don't consider all sports as games necessarily. Combat sports, I would not consider them as games. You get hurt in combat sports. You get penalized for quote-unquote playing poorly in combat sports, right? So that's why I don't consider combat sports as games. Regular sports, yeah, sure, why not? They are games. How about professional sports? Like, for example, professional basketball players, when they play games, they earn money, don't they? So they do get monetary gain, real monetary gain by playing the game. My answer to that is simply this. The game of basketball is unmistakably, unquestionably a game. Their participation in professional leagues and them earning money through professional leagues, that is not a game. Does that make sense? We should make these distinctions kasi. We should be able to make these distinctions when we're discussing games and not games. There are borders, there are boundaries. Like, for example, if you don't respect these borders or boundaries, nothing can ever be a game. Don't you buy your games from, say, the Steam store? So, in order to acquire a game, you have monetary loss. You pay for the game. So, if you do not make those boundaries, oh, that's not yet part of the game, then nothing could be a game, right? Does this also apply to esports since it becomes a career for the pros? Yeah, it does. So League of Legends, for example, is well and truly a game. But those who are playing in pro leagues for League of Legends, the pro league part, the career part is not a game. I would not consider careers as games. Right? We shouldn't. We shouldn't, right? It's our way of making a living. So does functional incompleteness and the artificial nature of games make sense? The more you think about it, the more you realize, you know what, you're right? All games are artificial in nature. It allows, it's like what John said a while ago, it allows us to enjoy games. Because if they are real, if we get real hurt or real benefits, it stops being enjoyable. It starts to become work. Another classic case study is this popular game, but in giant air quotes, called Axie. Axie always causes an argument among my students in life whenever I mention it in game design classes. So, what do you think about Axie? I am fortunate and happy that every time Axie or any other sort of NFT based game is brought up in class, I'm happy that my students are able to at least recognize that quite a few of these NFT games are at their core, at their heart, for a lack of a better term, they're scams. So I'm happy that my students in life are able to critically think about these. What makes me unhappy sometimes is their immediate dismissal of NFT technology. And while I don't think that our applications of it right now is actually a good application, I abhor it, I hate it. It's being used to take advantage of people, which, as you know, I hate. If anything is being used to take advantage of anyone else, oh my gosh, no. But I do think that there are applications of NFTs in gaming that we haven't explored yet. But anyway, Axie is, to me, not really a game. The aspects of Axie that does not involve real-world monetary gain, I would say, can still be considered a game, albeit a horrible one. I have seen the gameplay of Axie. It's horrible, isn't it? But once you start mixing in the play-to-earn model, it stops being a game. It's already work at that point. It took me a while to remember what Axie is. My gosh, the amount of money people lost. Exactly, right? I watched this mini documentary 2 days ago, I think, on Axie. I just happened to stumble upon it. And by the time I was done watching, I was seething. I was angry. I was so mad. Apparently, the ones who suffered the most are people from our side of the world, from Southeast Asia, from the Philippines. The ones who gained are already those who are rich in the first place. Are there success stories in Axie? I'm sure there are, but for the most part, people just lost money in that game, and it made me so angry. I considered it a gambling type game. Oh, that's a good point to raise, John. How about gambling, quote unquote, games? How about poker, blackjack? How about roulette? Are those games? In my opinion, we must be able to separate the gambling aspect from the gameplay aspect of these games. If we replace money with, say, chips that we could bet, quote unquote, and those chips are meaningless, you can't cash them in later for real world money, then what we have is a bona fide game. It's a game where you rely on RNG and some randomness and some luck in order to get a little bit of excitement when you win, and maybe a little bit of acceptable disappointment when you lose, right? So if you just use chips as points and these chips are not, you can't cash them in for money in the end, sure, they're still games. But once you start attributing real world financial value on these chips, no, I don't think it's a game anymore. Man, at work, people engage at some sort of online slot machine and I hear some actually losing money. See, the slot machine itself is just a random number generator. I mean, it's a rudimentary game, but it's a game nonetheless. But the problem is, it results in financial loss and financial gain. That's why, if we start counting that, nah, I wouldn't consider it a game. I agree, Sensei. If we have the useless currency, it's a game. But once IRL money is involved, I think people need to be more cognizant of how financially predatory those things are. And I like that you call them things and not games, because they are really no longer games. Shall we move on? We do have quite a few more to discuss. Next is what sets apart a game from gameful activities from simple playful activities. Rules. Rules is what governs play. And this is a property that sets apart games from other playful activities. Once you include rules into playful activities, then they transform from playful activities, simple playful activities, into actual games. Now, playful activities might have what I would call as proto-rules. They're essentially suggestions on how play is to be conducted. Because, some playful activities like catch have some quote-unquote rules. If you've ever played catch, right? You throw a ball, somebody else catches it, they throw it again, you catch it, right? So there is this suggestion on how it's supposed to be conducted, how it's supposed to be played. Those are what I would consider as proto-rules. They just define the repetitive action that you take when you are engaging in the playful activity. But these proto-rules are open to interpretation. So what happens if I catch the ball? Nothing really, you just throw it back. So it's open to interpretation. Some might say, if you catch the ball, then, I don't know, you have to clap your hands and then pass the ball again to somebody else or something like that. So these are all open to interpretation proto-rules. Once, however, these proto-rules transform into well-defined rules, catching the ball earns you 100 points. First to 1,000 wins. If you catch the ball but you fumble, essentially you catch it but you drop it, you lose 50 points instead. If you're unable to catch the ball, then you lose 50 points. If you don't throw the ball back to the other person within a specified amount of time, then you get a penalty. And then something else will trigger, some other mechanic of the game of catch will trigger. So once we start defining these proto-rules, turning them into more well-defined descriptions of how play is to be conducted and the consequences of not following said rules or breaking the rules, then the playful activity becomes a game. Yeah, so we're talking about catch, right? It could be a playful activity, but once you start applying point systems, once you start defining the boundary of the playing field, right? Because at some point we have to consider the boundary of the playing field. Otherwise, I can just throw the ball as far as I want, and that would not count as a penalty, right? That would be a little unfair. So we need to define these bounds of play. Once we define these, then what we have is a game. Gusto ko yun sa catch, ako yung nakahabol. Gusto ba ikaw yung ilagay ko dun sa ball? Now, one other thing about rules is usually when we engage in playful activity, we're not very competitive about it. It's actually the rules that tend to induce competition. Right? Actually, pwede ako naghahabol. Okay. Ikaw yung humahabol mismo. Pwede naman. So, when I say rules breed competition, usually when you start allocating or when you start defining rules of play, that's when people start becoming more, for a lack of a better term, they start to politic the rules, right? That's when things become a little bit more competitive. So see the difference between, for example, there's a competitive version of everything now, right? Competitive eating, for example. Eating could be a playful activity, but competitive eating adds rules to the activity of normal eating. Does that make sense? So rules set apart games from simple playful activities. Finally, we have resulting in quantifiable outcomes. The operative description here is quantifiable. When players engage in a game, it's important that they know what they are playing for. What exactly are we trying to do here? Are we trying to score more points? Are we trying to get more kills? Are we trying to take down the Nexus in League of Legends, for example? Are we trying to win more rounds in Valorant? Are we trying to reduce our opponent's life points to 0 in the case of Magic the Gathering or Yu-Gi-Oh? In all of these examples, notice that the goal has some number associated with it. Destroying the Nexus, that's a binary 0 or 1. Either the Nexus still stands or the Nexus falls. if you think about the life of the Nexus, then the life itself is also a number, right? It starts at whatever. What's the life of Nexus? How many hit points does the Nexus have in League of Legends? I actually never paid attention to that, but there's a number, right? Uh, let's say it's 1,000, and then every hit that you deal causes a certain amount of damage to the Nexus. But that's still a number. You want that life to become 0. Is it 20,000? I see. So 20,000 HP Nexus, you want that to be 0 for you to win. In terms of Valorant, for example, you want the number of rounds that you won to be greater than your opponents at the end of regulation. At the end of however many rounds is normal play. I don't play normal in Valorant. I only play Swift play. So I don't know actually how many rounds regular Valorant is played in. But that's beside the point. In terms of Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic, in Magic the Gathering, you start at 20 life and then it becomes 0. First to 13. I see. Hi, Kyoshiri. How are you? How are you doing? And then in terms of Yu-Gi-Oh! For example, it starts at 8,000 life and then you have to bring it down to 0. So all games have quantifiable outcomes. I really should remove the timer counter. It's blocking the top part of my slide. Let me get rid of that. Hold on. Is it this one? Nope. Which one is it? Is it this one? That's the one. And we remove also this one. Oh. Let's remove the timer first because it's blocking the view. And then 2 consecutive wins when in OT. But see, the point still stands. In any of these examples, the game has a quantifiable outcome. The ending is quantified through some form of a number. Right? This makes things like Cards Against Humanity a bit of a borderline thing. I'm not actually sure what the rules are for Cards Against Humanity. I think you need to get a certain number of victories in rounds, but the determination of victory is very arbitrary. If, say, for example, we're playing Valo, let's say, but instead of the win condition being having the most rounds won after 13 rounds of regulation, let's say the rules say that, oh, you must have the most beautiful, elegant takedown in the game. How are you going to define beautiful and elegant takedown? How are we going to know if we won? And think about it this way. Even if you accept that that is the win condition of modified Valorant, this modified Valorant that we're thinking of, you're still going to try to find a way to turn that into numbers, right? How do we measure the most elegant, beautiful takedown in the game? We must have criteria. We must have some form of rubric, which turns this analog way of getting victory to something more digital, to something more number-based. Does that make sense? First to 5 ata yung rulebook. But sometimes the players are just having fun and stuff. See, then it starts not becoming gamey anymore. I mean, it's the same for like of the Jackbox games where you pick the funniest answer. But even the picking the funniest answer, right? It's a vote thing. It's a votation thing. And the one who wins is actually the one who gets the most votes. So it still boils down to something numerical. Does that make sense? And there's a reason for this. As humans, we are just better at assessing countable and measurable things. Right? We're better at knowing, we're better at comparing something that's countable and numerical versus something that is abstract and vague. Right? It's a vote of 1. I mean, sometimes that's all it takes. But it's still a number. So, does it make sense that games have quantifiable outcome? An example of this also is in Baldur's Gate 3 or Battle Gears 3. Oh my gosh. Battle Gears 3, it still sticks in my brain. I still have not forgotten Battle Gears 3. For those who don't know, can I say that, Manis and Chloe? Kapag nagka kami, it's a matter of how much do I know this guy's humor. Cards Against Humanity. Yeah. So in Baldur's Gate 3, die rolls are used to determine the success of action. These rolls are compared against difficulty classes, and this is actually a quantified way of measuring success. Pwede naman, okay. I miss playing Cards Against Humanity. I mean, Cards Against Humanity is fun for the first 3 minutes, and then I start to feel like it's not as fun. It's like if you are... It really depends on the crowd, I guess. If the crowd are all on the same page and their humor levels are roughly relatively similar, what they find funny is relatively similar, then yeah, I guess we'll have a very great time playing Cards Against Humanity. But if you're looking for more of a game-like experience, I would say pick something else. There are more fun games you could be playing. Like, for example, what is that board game where you... Telephone. I think Telephone is what you call it, right? Where you draw and then you pass to the left and then they guess and then pass to the left, etc., etc. It's more of a playful activity than a game unless you follow the scoring system. Then it becomes a game again. But if you're looking for something more fun to play, I think that's better. Gartic Phone is its digital equivalent. I forgot. Telestrations! That's what I was thinking of. The title is Telestrations. I think you'll have more fun playing Telestrations than Cards Against Humanity. Just in my opinion. Don't let my opinion detract you though. If you have fun playing Cards Against Humanity, then go right ahead, right? But my recommendation is, if you find Cards Against Humanity fun, you might find Telestrations also fun. Alright, so there's one more idea, one more concept that I'd like to add to our definition of games. So far we know that games are artificial in nature, with quantifiable outcomes, and are governed by rules. I would also say that games have what we call feedback loops. When I take an action in a game, I must know immediately that the action had a result. I may not need to know yet what the result was, but I must know that it had a result. Right? This means maybe playing an audio cue or the game reacting visually. Oh, I pressed the button gets pressed. Oh, I hit the lever, I hear the rumblings in the distance. Where's the funny flow chart? Isn't this the funny flow chart? So, no, I think I know what you mean by funny flow chart. We won't have those funny flow charts today. Gosh, again, if we can have a part 2, we can go into that funny flow chart in part 2. There's so much we can talk about in terms of game design. Like, I don't think we can cover everything tonight. We'll talk about feedback loops a little bit though later. Definitely. It's part of my lesson plan this evening. Right, so, where was I? Yeah, feedback. The feedback does not need to be explicitly shown to the player immediately, but there must be reason, there must be intention, there must be a logical reason why the feedback is being delayed. Maybe it's to heighten suspense. Oh, I heard something happen, but I don't know what it is, so I'll be careful as I progress. Otherwise, I might encounter a monster that I accidentally set free. Something like that. But you're still informed of the feedback somehow. You know that something happened. Now, I would like to draw your attention to this little diagram that I have here. This is from Daniel Cook's article entitled Loops and Arcs in Games. I remember watching a video about FNAF and how it uses sounds. Yeah, I think FNAF is a classic example of games with delayed feedback. You hear sounds, but you don't see the effect immediately. You have to wait a little bit, then it's a way to heighten suspense. So, focus on this diagram for a bit, right? I love this diagram on the side of the screen because it shows us something that we also take for granted, right? It shows us something that we take for granted. Whenever we play games, we don't play the game with an empty mental model. So, what is a mental model? This is what we think will happen if we take certain actions, right? It's a predefined schema in our brains that informs us that if we move to the left, if we press A on the keyboard, our characters move to the left. If we press D, our characters might move to the right. If we press W, if it's 2D, we might jump. If it's 3D, we might move forward. Hello, Diwa. How are you? Tonight we're doing a game design class. So, when we play games, we have this existing mental model. Now, because of this mental model, when we enter into the game world, we take actions. We click up our mouse to shoot our gun. We press W to move forward. We press spacebar to jump. We press I to open our inventories or something like that. Now, when this action has been taken, the game resolves the effect of the action through rules, right? It resolves the effect of the action through rules. The rules also dictate if resources are gonna be spent, etc., etc. But once the action's consequence has been resolved, it must be shown to the player. The feedback must be shown. Because this feedback allows the player to update their mental models. How many times, I don't know if you play Star Rail, I do. I keep pressing P, I think, to open the party menu. Because in Genshin, I believe it's P to open the party menu. But actually, it has to be P, right? So, that's an example of me not updating my mental model. I already know that's not gonna work, but I keep pressing it anyway because of force of habit. So, it's a mental model that's stuck and doesn't want to get updated. But there are games where your initial perception of what might happen gets updated because when you actually take action, it does not match what you expect will happen. Just finished the stream. Oh, how was your stream? Did you have fun today, Diwa, in your stream? I hope you did have fun. I heard you were doing karaoke tonight. Muscle memory, yeah. I had this a lot in Baldur's Gate as well. I keep pressing I for inventory, but I actually opens the illithid menu. So I keep staring at my brain instead of opening my inventory. I keep pressing pause whenever I play Arc Knight. See? Ah, you finished art then karaoke. Nice. Diwa, let's go. So, does this make sense? Games having feedback loops. So, we have a preconceived notion in our brains of what might happen. This informs our actions. Our actions are resolved by the game's rules, and then the game gives us feedback, and then this feedback updates our mental models. Now, one small thing I'd like to mention here. This diagram also tells us the biggest difference between video games and physical board games. Hey, hello, 13 Draws. Yeah, go ahead, take a seat and listen to teacher. So, this loop diagram also tells us the biggest difference between physical games and digital games. Specifically, what resolves the rules. A digital game's rules is resolved by the computer. So it's the computer that determines what happens. In a board game or the physical game, it's the players that resolve the rules. This is why board games tend to have difficulty with withholding information from the players because the players have to resolve the effect of their action, so they need to know. But a digital game is actually much better at doing that because the digital game doesn't need to tell you immediately what happened. It just tells you, oh, something happened, but hey, good luck discovering what it actually is. See? D&D bridges the gap. Dungeons and Dragons bridges the gap. in Dungeons and Dragons, a designated DM, Dungeon Master, is resolving the rules for the game. The DM is not necessarily one of the players, so the DM can withhold information as needed from the players through the DM screen. So that's why I consider Dungeons and Dragons as a digital game, almost a digital game, right? It's like one step away from a digital game. Right, good. It's cool that you're making realizations as we discuss this. That means what I'm doing, the silly thing that I'm doing because of a sub goal, is actually informative. That's cool. That's good. I'm happy. I'm glad that that's what's happening. So, yeah, I already explained what this is. Mental model, what the player knows originally, could be sparse. Actions are the result of the mental model, what the player will do. Rules decide how the game would react to the action. And then feedback is the reaction of the game to the player action. In summary, so to summarize the first part of our lesson this evening, gaming is an inherently playful activity. It involves imagination, and normally we only engage in it voluntarily in a relatively stress-free situation. However, games are not the only form of playful activity. In fact, Ludus is more or less a subset of Padya, and there is difference between playful activities and gameful activities. It's not that silly, it's really interesting. Hey, thank you. Whew! What I do in life is translating to what I'm doing online. Oh my god, is this a immersion break? Are we seeing a blurring of line? Speaking of blurring of line, shall we talk about theories? There you go again. That's me with my weird segues. The next part of tonight's class is a little lecture-y, but if I could get your attention for the next 30 minutes or so, I'm sure you'd be learning quite a lot of new things. These are foundational theories in game design. But I also will be touching upon theories of psychology, player behavior. I think it's important for us to discuss this because later when we talk about player experiences, it's better that we know at least to a certain degree these foundational theories. Psychology, ayan na, seated na. Kieran is ready. So the first theory is actually more game related. It's not yet the psychology part. We'll get there. But the first theory is a very important foundational theory in game design. In fact, it's one of the first theories that should be taught to any game designer. I think it's a classical theory for a reason. It's the MDA framework. MDA stands for Mechanics, Dynamics, and Aesthetics. These are the three elements of games according to Hunick, Zubek, and LeBlanc. Such an old paper, by the way. It was written originally in 2004. It's 2023, almost 2024. This is a 20-year-old theory, but it still stands, right? There has been evolutions of this theory over time. If you read about this, if you look for the original paper, you'll find that it has been cited by more contemporary works that proposes alternative models, but the alternative models still refer back to the original MDA. So, what is this model? MDA, Mechanics, Dynamics, Aesthetics, is a formal approach for understanding games. It's a formal approach. Did I stumble into a teacher stream? Sure. Yeah. Okay, to explain for those who are just hopping in. Oh, thank you for the follow, Aki7. Glad you could join the stream tonight. Go take a seat and listen to teacher. So, for those who don't know what's happening tonight, or for those who are new to the stream, we did a subathon end of August, and one of the sub goals is I will conduct a game design class. I'm Sensay Muteki, and I'm Sensay online, but I'm also a Sensay in life. So this is part of what I do in real life, right? And so, yeah, so that you get a little peek of what I actually do in real life, I decided to include as a sub goal a game design class. So since we managed to meet the sub goal as a community, here we are now. So, shall we continue discussing the MDA framework? So, It's a formal approach for understanding games, and it's actually one of the first formal approaches for understanding games. Prior to this, there were attempts at making sense of what makes games fun, but the MDA framework is one of the first to really dig down deep into what makes games fun. It's one of the first formal approaches. It's also one of the first to acknowledge that games are dynamic systems. At around this time, games started becoming more and more complex with a lot more moving parts, and it becomes less and less apparent if a game will be successful or not, if a game will be addictive or not, if a game would hold an audience or not. So, MDA acknowledges that games are no longer simple pastimes that are enjoyable. They are actually dynamic systems composed of different elements, and the success of a game hinges on the interplay between these elements, on the interplay between the game's mechanics, the game's dynamic systems, and the game's aesthetic experiences, or at least the aesthetic experiences that games produce. MDA is also one of the classic theories in game analysis and game design, and like I said a while ago, to this day it's still being cited when we do research in game design. So, what are the three elements? The mechanics, dynamics, aesthetics. Let's define each one of them. Starting with mechanics. According to MDA, mechanics are the specific actions players may take as they interact with the game. This is a bit different from the colloquial definition of a game mechanic. So, when you say game mechanic, often you think of combat mechanics or crafting mechanics or movement mechanics. According to MDA, it's more basic than that. It's literally just the actions that you can take in the game. Can you attack? Okay, that's a mechanic. Can you move forward? That's a mechanic. Can you turn in place? That's a mechanic. Can you strafe? That's a mechanic. Can you aim a gun? That's a mechanic. Okay? So, the specific actions, the individual actions, are what counts as mechanics, at least according to the MDA framework. I'm not saying that this should always be the case. All I'm saying is if we follow the MDA framework, and for us to follow it properly, we have to consider mechanics as simply the actions players are allowed to take in a game. And I emphasize that word, allowed to take, because these are also actions afforded by the game, right? These are not any whatever action. These are actions allowed by the game that players can take. Now, according to the MDA framework, these mechanics must be compelling. Otherwise, players would not be incentivized to engage in mechanics. Like, this is... sorry, a small rant, but this is what I see is often like the problem with JRPGs. I love JRPGs. I love the unique mechanics of JRPGs, but they're so like loaded with mechanics sometimes. I remember playing Xenoblade Chronicles, the one with Rex, and where you unlock blades, and these blades are actually, some of them are waifus. Yeah, some of them are waifus that you fight alongside with. And it has so many interesting mechanics, but there's just a lot. And sometimes I forget that certain mechanics in that game exist, and I never get to use it until that one opportunity, one time, one encounter where it's the only way to succeed. I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot that this mechanic exists, right? So, your mechanics must be compelling enough so that players would be incentivized to interact with them. Otherwise, they will be forgotten, right? So, shall we go now to dynamics? So, the ones that you know or ones that you consider as mechanics are actually more like dynamics according to MDA. The crafting systems, the combat systems, right? These are all what we consider as dynamics. According to MDA, dynamics refer to the interactions of various elements, right? So when you attack, and let's say you attack an opponent wearing steel armor, if you're using a sharp weapon, it gets deflected. That is part of a system. That is part of the combat dynamic, right? And then if I decide to use a hammer instead, a blunt weapon, to go against plate armor, it deals effective damage. That plus attacking with a bladed weapon, plus all the various different armors, that is all part of the combat dynamic. Okay? So, it makes sense therefore that the mechanics are the ones that comprise dynamics. And hopefully it will also make sense later when we move to aesthetics, when I say that the dynamic systems are the ones that give rise. They're the ones that produce desired aesthetic experiences. For example, challenge is an aesthetic experience. Challenge arises from the interplay of various pressures coming from the game, including time, resources, and other players, right? Lack of resources, lack of time, other players trying to steal from you. The interplay of these systems result in the experience of challenge. Now, so speaking of challenge, let's talk about that next. Aesthetics, according to MDA, is what makes the game fun. Aesthetics describes Sensay in his element. I suppose so. Hello, Nyakasen. So, aesthetics answers the question of what makes a game fun. Aesthetics describes the desirable emotional responses that's evoked in the player when they interact with its dynamic systems. And at least for MDA, for Unique, Zubek, and LeBlanc, this goes beyond visual, audio, and narrative elements. In fact, according to them, aesthetics is better described as aesthetic experiences. It is what the player feels as they play the game. Nag-shift na nga ako to game development. Wow! Game development is fun. Actually, game design is fun. Game development, that's a different thing altogether. See? Chloe's reacting. Chloe knows. Game design is fun. Game development, well, different beast. So, does MDA make sense? There's one more component to MDA that we haven't discussed yet. There is a reason why there are arrows in the MDA framework. MDA also shows a dichotomy between the creation of games and the consumption of games. There is a difference between the two. According to the theory, players consume games from aesthetics, then dynamics, and then mechanics. I'll enroll again as long as Sensay is teaching. Sensay, ikaw na lang prof ko sa isang subject, please. Di ako pumapasok. Oh my gosh. Ba't hindi pumapasok yung prof mo? Grabe naman. So, to explain what this means. As a player, right? When you play a game for the first time, aren't you drawn into the game because of its aesthetic experiences? Aren't you drawn into the game because it's fun, right? And then when you find the game fun, when you find the emotional responses you're having to the game is desirable for you, that's when you start looking at the game systems. That's when you begin to appreciate, oh, that's why I'm having fun. The combat system is very compelling. Oh, that's why I'm having fun. The crafting system allows for a lot of creativity. And then, once you're convinced that the dynamic systems are what makes things fun for you, that's when you start looking at the individual mechanics. Oh, this is why this system works so well for me. I love how they did this mechanic, right? And it's the mechanics that keep you playing. Does that make sense? So, games are consumed from aesthetics all the way to mechanics in that direction. The challenge, however, is game designers tend to design games from the opposite direction. Game designers start with mechanics. They design the mechanics first, which then they piece together to form the game's dynamics. And then that's when they think about tuning the aesthetic experiences. Didn't actually realize that until now. But that's the case, right? That's one of the things that the MDA framework reveals to us. This really explains a lot in how a person gets into a game. Yeah. This is why it's a classic theory. It's a classic theory for a reason. It explains a lot. Takes notes as a games A&D student. Well, I hope it helps you. I hope it helps you. In summary, the MDA framework is a way for game designers to make sense of how design can give rise to player experiences. Models like MDA, for example, are important to game designers as they are in the business. Game designers are in the business, quite literally, of crafting player experiences, right? If you're unable to craft desirable player experiences, then your games won't be successful. Your games won't sell. You'd lose business, right? And I would like to add to this summary that MDA is not the only framework anymore. It's a 20-year-old framework. I'm sure if you do your digging, you'll find more frameworks of making sense of game design. Okay? Right. Shall we proceed to the next? This one is one of my favorites, flow theory. Whenever I talk about flow theory, I realize that I'm also in a state of flow. So let's talk about it. So this is from psychology. And please don't ask me to pronounce the name of the person who coined the term flow theory. Such an old theory as well, 1970s, right? How do you pronounce this person's name? Mihaly. Russian, I think. But anyway, he coined this term in the 1970s. Really? That's how you pronounce it? Csikszentmihalyi? Okay, I never really figured out how to pronounce this person's name. His first name is Mihaly, something like that. Ah, that's how they pronounce it. Okay. Well, regardless of the pronunciation, this was coined as early as the 1970s. Yeah, basta siya. It's coined as early as the 1970s. By the way, whenever I do research on anything and I find names of people, I make it a habit nowadays to also research how they look like. Because I don't want them to just be names on a research paper, names on a book, names on a whatever paper, right? This is from psychology. Yeah. So I don't just want them to be names. I want them to actually be people. So I search for their pictures. And this guy's picture, he's obviously old now, but he looks like such a jolly fellow. Like someone you might enjoy just sitting in front of listening to stories. Of course, I don't know how he actually is in real life, but that's what his photos seem to indicate. May pag-topic sa psych is, oh my gosh, what is that? And ayoko sabihin na, wait, what? What? Okay. Pornay kasi pagbigkas. Okay, anyway. Oh, is that the name? That's a name. That's the name of the author. But the pronunciation is yun nga, pero alam mo yung my mouth moves faster than my brain. Please. Anyway, speaking of mouths moving faster than your brain, flow theory might explain that. Let's talk about this. So, in psychology, flow state, also called being in the zone, is a state that happens when individuals feel that their skill is just right for the challenge they are facing. Fly, get away from my face. It's distracting me and it's snapping me out of flow state. So, when your skill level is just right and it matches just right to the amount of challenge that you are facing, then you enter into a state of zone. The challenge becomes autotelic in nature. The idea is overcoming the challenge through one's own skill is already reward enough. Na-psychoanalyze na, oh my gosh. So, this diagram here, the one that I don't think you can see my mouse. I don't have the mouse on capture. But the diagram here shows the idea of flow state. See, when you play a game or actually when you engage in any activity that requires skill, over time, your ability develops. Over time, your ability increases. If the activity doesn't match that with appropriate level of challenge, if the challenge does not scale, it doesn't scale at the same pace or relatively the same pace as your ability scales, right? You either go into a state of boredom if the scaling of the challenge is too slow, or you go into a state of frustration if the scaling of the challenge is too fast. It's too fast that your skill can't keep up. But if you're in that sweet spot, right where your ability is just about what it takes to overcome challenge, then you go into the zone. Platform games. Oh, for some people, platform games is what triggers their flow state, right? That's why some people rage quit, or is that on the person? Yes. So, people who rage quit, that tends to happen when the game provides challenges that their abilities can't overcome. Yeah, the meme there is it's called skill issue. Skill issue, sige sabihin na natin, we can call it that. But the psychological explanation is this. The skill level was unable to match the challenge at hand. Frustration is League of Legends. Yeah. Flappy Bird, for example. In Flappy Bird, I don't know if you've ever had cases where when you're playing Flappy Bird, initially you'd be bumping into the obstacles, restarting the game over and over, and then all of a sudden, for some reason, you get that golden run where you start off like, oh, I managed to clear 10 obstacles, and then I cleared 10 more, and then 10 more, and all of a sudden I'm beating my high score, and all of a sudden I'm setting a new high score. And all of a sudden, even though I can't explain it, it seems like I'm so in tune with the game that no challenge is too difficult for me. I'm able to overcome. Then you're in flow state. Okay, forgetting to eat is also a side effect of flow state. Shall we talk about that? So, one of the most vivid, I guess, visualizations, depictions of flow state, flow theory, and being in the zone is in the anime Kuroko no Basuke. It's characterized by lightning coming from their eyes. But what I'm trying to say here is flow state can be experienced by anyone in any activity, not just in games, right? Whenever you have an activity where challenge clashes with ability, then flow state could be achieved. Artists, doctors, scientists, writers, athletes, anyone can enter flow state. No? It's also initial D. Yeah, it's also in initial D. Yes. Yeah, being in any anime that depicts being in the zone. When they use the term being in the zone, they're actually talking about flow theory. So, okay. Thank you, Ren, for lurking. Thank you for the lurk. So, let's talk about the characteristics of flow state. How do we know we're in flow state? Diwa, actually, you hit upon something very important, no? When a person is in flow state, they have, according to Mihaly and Nakamura, this is the same person as a while ago, but this is a more recent paper, more recent research that they did. I think this is a book, actually, the one that I'm citing here. Anyway, flow state, according to them, is characterized by increased and focused attention on the current activity. You know, when you almost tunnel vision into, let's say it's a game, right? You tunnel vision onto the game and nothing else around you matters. You're so hyper-focused that things to your left, things to your right, things above you, things below you don't bother you. Your focus is captured and is solely focused on that game that you're playing. But again, this is not just in games. Sometimes musicians, when they're playing an instrument, they're so hyper-focused on the instrument that nothing else around them matters, right? They're able to tune everything out and focus just on them playing their instrument. Flow state is me playing Katarina and Aram and somehow getting a penta. Yeah, exactly. That one, Panda, might be more on the second characteristic of flow state, the merging of action and awareness. To explain what this is, awareness describes being aware of the factors that happen in the activity that you're engaging in. Again, if it's a game, you're aware of, say, people's movements, your opponent's movements on the map. You're being aware of your current location in the map. You're aware of your cooldowns. You're aware of the items that you currently have. You are aware of the score. You're aware of your KDA, etc., etc. You're aware of your HP, your mana, every resource you're aware. Action is, well, as the name implies, it's you taking an action. It's you engaging in a mechanic. When you're in a state of flow, those two go hand in hand. They meld into one. They merge into one. You're not thinking of your action anymore. Stimuli comes in, you react immediately. No thinking in between, right? In the case of maybe Katarina in League of Legends, you see someone within range of your shunpo, you just shunpo to them. You see 3 people clumped in one small space, no thinking necessary. Shunpo in the middle and you ult, right? That is this merging of action and awareness. You don't think of your action anymore, you just do it, right? And when we're in the zone, that's often what happens. This might explain also what Kira was saying a while ago about mouth being faster than brain. The action of the mouth is so hand in hand with the brain that it sort of gets ahead of the brain. And when you're in the state of zone, yeah, see a good dagger placement, just go in. You don't even think about it. There's also the idea of, so di ako tanga yun ba yun? Hindi naman. That's a different question, Kira, and I do not want to answer that. That is not on me to answer. Sige. So, next, loss of reflective self-consciousness. This is different from loss of consciousness. That's different. You don't pass out when you're in a state of flow. You just lose this reflective state where you're not reflecting on the impact of your actions, the consequences of your actions. You're not reflecting on your current self. There's no space for that in flow state. You tend to just ignore what's currently happening and you're just focused on the important matters so you could react immediately, right? So that's loss of reflective self-consciousness. Hand in hand with this is sense of control, right? So you're not thinking too much of what's happening. You feel like you are in control, in complete control of everything. And as a result of all of this, you experience a distortion of time. You don't realize that you have been playing Minecraft for 12 hours already. You don't realize that you have been drawing for an entire day. Sometimes it even causes you to lose sleep, to not feel hunger, right? To not feel the urge to eat because you are so focused and you don't notice that time has passed. I also forget to breathe when I'm in that state. That is also a side effect of being in a state of flow. The new champion is kind of like that. Si Briar, I see. Yeah. Briar's mechanics can be considered sort of like a depiction of flow state in-game. That's kind of meta. Imagine being in flow state and also playing Briar, and then Briar goes into flow state as well. You and your champion are both in flow state. Me playing Genshin for over 6 hours back in the day. Yeah, that could be possible. Yeah, that could be you being in the zone. Yeah, so at the end of all of this, the idea is the experience of the activity now is intrinsically rewarding. The activity itself is reward enough. You do not need any extra incentive to engage in the activity. No bragging rights is necessary. No financial reward is necessary. No, nothing is. Just the game itself is reward enough. Just the activity itself is reward enough. Flow tayo na. Well. In summary, it is in a game designer's best interest to get players to flow state. The theory here is maximum enjoyment can be achieved if players don't need external factors to remain motivated to play, right? If the game is, or the challenge of the game is reward enough, overcoming the challenge of the game is reward enough, then the game becomes autotelic, it becomes maximally enjoyable. Okay? Okay tayo sa flow state? Relatable naman siya? Now, one thing I'd like to say though, be careful when describing being in flow state. One common misconception is going into autopilot mode is also being in flow state. That's not the case. In autopilot mode, you actually regain reflective self-consciousness. Your brain is thinking of something completely different. Your fingers, your fingers move in a certain way. It's repeating certain actions, but your brain is elsewhere. So that is not flow state. That is autopilot mode. It's easy to confuse the two. You must have all of the characteristics before you could consider yourself to be in flow state. In my experience, Dark Souls has a weird balance between wanting to throw your controller versus overcoming the challenge. But hey, if you are one of the target demographic of Dark Souls, then I'm sure the challenge of it is enough for you to keep going, right? The challenge of the bosses and the enemies is enough for you to keep playing. So that means Dark Souls is autotelic for you. See, the thing is, we all have different skill levels. We all have very different challenges that we are willing to overcome and are able to overcome. So our flow state triggers are different. It's even different from activity to activity. Some of us are more easily able to enter flow state in activities that we inherently already enjoy. If we love to draw, then maybe it's easier for us to enter flow state when we draw. If we love to play Valo, then maybe it's easy for us to enter flow state when we play Valo. If we hate studying, imagine Sensay talking about hating to study. But if we hate to study, then we might need to put extra effort in order to enter flow state when we study. Identifying what causes us to enter flow state faster than others is also a good way of improving our processes in other things. If we're able to recognize na, oh, in League of Legends, it seems like I enter flow state quickly. But when it comes to, let's say, studying for an exam, it seems like I can't. So try to identify, if you can, what's different. I know one is a game and one's supposed to be enjoyable and one isn't, but we also know that we can enter flow state in any sort of activity. So what can I do so that I could also enter flow state when I'm reviewing for an exam? That might be helpful, right? Anyway, shall we go to the next theory? We still have a few left. Hope you're still enjoying what we're discussing so far. The next theory is presence. Presence goes hand in hand with flow state, and both of them contribute to the feeling of immersion. We feel immersed if we feel a sense of presence and a sense of flow. So what is presence? Presence is feeling as if you are in the virtual world, right? So people experiencing presence in virtual reality or digital games have the feeling of being there. You're in the game. You're in the scene, despite the scene being completely artificial, right? I read that as spiritual presence. It's spatial presence. Yeah. Of course, Sensei, this is honestly making me realize a bunch of things. That's cool. That's good. Right. Yeah. My hope is, even if you're not interested in game design, that you find things of value from what we're going to be discussing tonight. So, let's talk about this presence. According to Worth and everyone else, Worth, Hartman, Vorderer, and Boching, in their 2007 paper on spatial presence and the SSM, spatial situation model, they say that when we feel presence, it's like even if the imagined world is artificial and functionally incomplete, we still feel like it is real. Some games have advantage over others in terms of spatial presence. VR games definitely have an advantage. You wear a headset, you see directly what you're supposed to see, and so it's easy to establish spatial presence. But you do not need VR in order to reach spatial presence. Imagine the last time you played Genshin and it felt like you are there. You're in Mondstadt. You are feeling the breeze of the air. You're looking at the blue sky. You are chilling in the green grasses of Mondstadt, right? You feel like you are there even if you're not playing in VR. You don't even need a big monitor for that. Some people experience this spatial presence even if they're just playing on a phone, right? So, how is this spatial presence established? According to Worth et al., first, a spatial situation model is established. Now, this sounds very complicated, but what it ultimately is when you enter into a game for the first time, you're not yet feeling spatial presence. The first thing you do is you just look around. Et al. My Oshi. It's easier. There's like 4 people. So, the first thing you do is you just look around. What's around me? There seems to be a pile of rocks to the left. There is a house in the distance to the right. In front of me is the coastline. A little bit beyond is the ocean. Behind me is, I don't know, maybe a rolling green prairie, for example. Is that possible? Are prairies green? Aren't prairies like... Anyway, you know what I mean, right? So, this is what happens first. You enter into a game and then you notice where you are. And your brain starts to form a mental model of where you are in the game. Now, as you keep playing, this spatial situation model evolves into spatial presence. The model gets so absorbed in your brain that you cannot tell anymore the difference between what's real and what isn't, at least temporarily while you're playing, right? This is when the players are now hooked and they feel like they are in the game itself and they're not just an external observer anymore. When that happens, then you feel presence. Then you feel immersed. Imagine mo, nagpakahirap ka magsulat tapos magiging et al ka na lang. I mean, to be fair, you only do the et al when you are parenthetically citing a source. In the references, the whole names are still gonna be there. Pag Moteki, Moteki et al na lang. Then in spatial presence, a huge part of visual novels. That's an interesting question. Visual novels, what are they? So, the immersion we feel in visual novels, I think really is connected to spatial presence. There's also a state of flow when you're playing visual novels, but it's mostly spatial presence. It doesn't seem like spatial presence at first because there is no conventional concept of space in a visual novel. It's a flat art piece, right? But again, this speaks to the power of the brain and speaks to the power of spatial presence. It does not need a 3D world, right? A well-defined 2D world is enough to induce spatial presence. Yeah. I'm having Nier Automata flashbacks. I was gonna mention a game kaso sobrang spoiler kasi the whole plot of the game. This can happen no matter how simple the game's art is. Like, case in point would be Undertale, for example. Undertale, for example, has very simplistic art, at least from the gameplay of it that I have watched. And yet, because of how immersive the experience is, because of how easy it is also to enter state of flow when playing Undertale, spatial presence is so easily established in that game. Oh, don't mention it na if it's a spoiler. Don't mention if it's a spoiler, okay? Should I have put the tag spoiler somewhere? Maybe I should have. So in summary, a flow state describes the alteration of the experience of time. Spatial presence describes the alteration of the experience of space. Flow and presence in turn describe what it means to be immersed. Alright? Okay, sure. I guess most FF games made me feel spatial presence. FF games are so good at making you feel spatial presence. It's so easy to find connections between real world and Final Fantasy games. And the way they tell their stories are also so engaging. It's hard to not feel spatial presence when playing Final Fantasy. Yeah. Especially the MMO. Yeah, FF14. Yeah. Oh yeah, also the soundtrack. I keep forgetting. Yes. Soundtrack plays a good role then in establishing spatial presence. Good soundtrack sort of, for a lack of a better term, lubricates the brain and allows you to experience spatial presence a little faster. It sets the mood, essentially, yeah. Okay. This, I think, is the last of the theories. And this one is the most related to psychology. So if there are psychology students in the chat, you may have heard of this self-determination theory. Ayan na, seated na. Self-determination theory sounds familiar. I'll be discussing self-determination theory in the context of games, of course. So if you may actually know more about this than me, so feel free, of course, to share what you know. But we'll talk about it in the context of games and how it applies to games. So we talked about autotelic games. We also talked about being motivated. Self-determination theory is a model of engagement, a model of motivation, a model that we could use to understand how people feel motivated. All right? Are you okay with being DM'd? I really want to know if you're thinking of what you were thinking. Hello, Ame. Sorry, Taka. Gosh, I keep calling you Ame for no reason. Welcome, Taka. We're about halfway through the game design class, so I hope you'll be able to catch up. But we're discussing self-determination theory now. A very important theory in understanding motivation and engagement. Yeah. Tonight is the game design class. We managed to reach the sub-goal last end of August, and so one of the sub-goals was a game design class. I dread the other sub-goal, the other class that I need to do. Not gonna, for the longest time, I had an idea of a VTuber-oriented rhythm game. Yeah, that's cool. Maybe self-determination theory would help you figure out how to make the game engaging. So shall we talk about it? Shall we talk about self-determination theory, SDT? With lore and everything, yeah. Lore is probably more related to what we just finished discussing though, spatial presence. But it might contribute as well to self-determination. Let's talk about this one. Self-determination theory was proposed by Desi and Ryan in 2012. I'm sure that the work is much older than this, but I'm using the 2012 paper for this content. So, SDT presents a continuum of motivation. The idea is humans start with no motivation and could end up with intrinsic motivation. So, no motivation is called amotivation. Although I don't think I put it in this slide. It's called amotivation, no motivation. And then on the other end, when the motivation is internal, it's called intrinsic motivation, right? If there is no motivation, then we consider that state as not self-determined. But if we are at the state of intrinsic motivation, we call that highly self-determined. External or extrinsic motivation is somewhere in the middle. Okay? Intrinsic motivation, my Oshi. Why do I feel like I've heard this before? You may have actually. You may have had subjects about understanding yourself. So this might have been discussed there. The plot is that we're in some sort of city or world where various players and VTubers living together, kind of like a society. Music have powers and it's also tied to our emotion, and we often make use of it to generate energy. That's cool. That's a cool concept. Yeah. Stick around, Taka, because after this theory, we're gonna talk about player experience. You might want to think about that first over the plot. The plot is cool to think about, but often when we're designing games and we're beginning with the plot, we tend to get stuck because we're thinking of the plot a little too much, and we realize that games aren't as linear as some of the plots that we come up with. And so we have to, at least in my opinion, we should be prioritizing the player experience over the plot, over any other actually element of games that we design. So stick around for the player experience part. After self-determination theory, we'll go to player experience. For some reason, I thought that was no straight roads. What? So, again, at the leftmost side of the spectrum is non-self-determination. There is no motivation. You don't want to engage in an activity. On the other side is high self-determination. This is when motivation is intrinsic. It's internal in nature. You do not need any external forces, any external rewards in order to be motivated. Okay? So, let's look at this one. According to Desi and Ryan, in order to achieve high self-determination, people must have 3 basic needs satisfied. The need for competence, the need for autonomy, and the need for relatedness. So, if these 3 basic needs are satisfied, then it's possible for someone to transition from no motivation to intrinsic motivation. Okay? Because for example, when you hear a game for the first time, you're not really interested in it. You're not motivated to play it. But then, you might hear your friends playing and you think, maybe I should try because my friends are trying the game or my friends are enjoying the game. That's extrinsic motivation. You're not the one motivating yourself, it's other people, right? And so you try it. And then when you try the game, if the game satisfies these 3 basic needs, the need for competence, the need for autonomy, and the need for relatedness, then the extrinsic motivation becomes intrinsic. You do not need anymore the validation of friends. You do not need anymore the validation of some external ego boost. You do not need anymore the validation of maybe some sort of financial gain, if that's connected to the activity. No, you don't need any of these anymore. You're just so interested in the activity that you don't need any other reason. The activity itself is enough of a motivator. Me buying my friend Outlast will be coerced into playing it. Taka is sharing the idea for the rhythm game. So there will be boss songs where someone goes into an uncontrollable state of emotional chaos, and so more critical mode of the rhythm game is required. Instead of trying to hit a specific threshold, you are required to complete the song without draining your HP to 0, which again explains the critical risk. Wow, that's kind of a lot of mechanics there. I call it critical tuning since the device you're playing with in the game may have the ability to tune and control the emotion of anybody that connects to. Also, my advice here is just be careful when you keep adding more mechanics like we discussed a while ago in the MDA framework. If the mechanics are not compelling, then players might not find the need to engage in them. Okay? Also, one drawback of adding too many mechanics is it might hamper autonomy. Right? The second basic need. We'll discuss all of the 3. So, Sensei, pag binilhan ba kita ng Jump King or Getting Over It, lalaruin mo ba? I mean, I might. So, let's talk about each one of the 3 basic needs. Let's talk about competence first. So, this is why I was saying a while ago, be careful if you're designing a game and then you're adding too many mechanics. if there are too many mechanics built into the game, it might hamper autonomy and it might reduce the feeling of competence as well. Because if there's too many in the game, kind of like the JRPGs, you might not be able to practice some of them often enough that when you need to use that mechanic, you don't know how to make use of it. So you lack competence. So what is competence? Competence means that people like to feel that they are able to meet the requirements of tasks they have to or they want to complete. The idea is when this is applied to games, positive player experiences tend to result from players being given the ability to solve in-game problems without external help. You must give your players enough opportunity to practice the skills they need to succeed in the game. You must give your players avenues of manifesting these skills. You must give your players challenges that are just right to their skill level at any given time so they feel like they are competent. If they feel that they are competent in a task, there's a higher probability, there's a higher possibility that they would keep playing your game because they feel satisfied, right? Taka, be careful with saying that as well, right? I understand that it's not gonna be for everyone, but as game designers, we must be willing to make concessions as well, right? Like we need to make concessions in order to make sure that even our intended audience would love the game that we make. Okay? Yeah, with me around 50 plus attempts at Hades. Hades is actually an interesting case because whenever I play Hades, I do feel like I'm competent. After a few rounds of practice, I feel like I can overcome certain challenges. And then the game throws a curveball at me, but I do not feel turned off about it because the game has built enough goodwill, right? That I know, as Rhythm Gamers stick around for the OST. So, I know in Hades that I have overcome enough challenges that this one new challenge is just a few more practice runs away from being overcome. Does that make sense? So, even though the game throws us curveballs at some points in Hades, we don't feel bad about it. We don't feel disengaged. We actually feel more motivated because the game has given us enough goodwill. The game has given us enough opportunities to show that we can do it. So, if we can do it in the lower levels, we just need to play a little tighter. We just need to hit buttons a little faster. We need to dodge. We need to time our dodges a little better. And then eventually we'll be able to overcome this new curveball. For the game to just throw another curveball again towards the end. Right? So, that's still explained by competence if in SDT. Already got to the final boss like before getting the clear, and I was like, I just need to get good. Exactly, right? That's evidence that the game has given you enough competence or enough avenues to exhibit your competence, that you feel that way when the game challenges you. Speaks to how well Hades is actually designed, right? I love that game actually. One of these days I'll play that on stream. I downloaded, I actually got the game on Steam. I have it on my Switch, and I actually played the game on Switch, and I have a lot of progress on Switch. But I'm willing to restart progress on Steam just to play it on stream. What? Play on Steam to play it on stream. Well. Next is autonomy. Let's talk about autonomy next. Autonomy speaks to how players want to feel that they have the liberty to take action. We do not want to handhold our players too much. But for the sake of competence, we might need to handhold them at least initially. Once they're good enough, we can let go of their hand and they can decide on their own. Rap star na si Sensay. I mean, you know. I do have a cover of End of a Life on YouTube, so I guess. If ever I do, I'll just build the game about the same way that other popular rhythm game does. Briefly explained lore, introduced via storytelling, vast array of difficulty choices to fit players of all skill levels. That's good. The different levels of difficulty also gives players the opportunity to hone their skills and gives them an avenue to express their competence. Okay? Having the levels be unlocked initially, the levels of difficulty be unlocked initially, gives players a sense of autonomy, right? Like, for example, some rhythm games have this issue where you have to beat all of the songs in medium difficulty before you could unlock the hardest difficulty. That is sort of a breach of autonomy. You mean to tell me that I need to complete everything first before I unlock the next level? Can I not play the difficult version of the song that I really like? Why do I have to play the medium difficulty version of songs that I don't like? So, yeah. They kind of lose interest at that point. Speaks to the need for autonomy, right? So applying this to games, positive player experiences arise when players are allowed to make their own decisions and are given feedback on the consequences of their actions. The tuning device can be put into practice or normal mode so a song can be practiced multiple times. Critical mode is only enabled depending on the player or if the story requires. Yeah, that works. That works. Using the tuning device as a way of practice. So it gives autonomy to the players. They could practice at any time. It also allows them to hone competence. That's good. The last basic need, according to self-determination, is relatedness. This refers to being integrated in interpersonal settings. The theory claims that if we are part of a community of players, it improves the player experience. It also establishes a sense of security because, hey, the community says this is something I can do. I can do that? Neat. That's great. Let's do it. It fosters exploratory behavior. Okay? So the idea is, if the game is able to foster all three basic needs, satisfy all three basic needs, it's possible for you to turn your players from being not motivated at all to being intrinsically or self-motivated, highly self-determined. Okay? So in summary, self-determination could be considered a barometer of engagement, a measure of engagement. Designers would want players to be motivated to play without external pressures. Also, it is possible to start in a state of no motivation and end up in a state of high internal motivation. So do not feel disheartened if initially your players are not quite motivated to play your game. Over time, as you provide them with more avenues to improve competence, as you provide them promises of autonomy, and as you foster an interpersonal community and you foster relatedness, then it's entirely possible to transition from no motivation to high internal motivation. When you see those meme builds and want to try them yourself for a change of pace. Yeah, games allowing for meme builds is a demonstration of games allowing for autonomy. Lanota already did the same thing. Boss songs require an experimental mode similar to critical mode I mentioned to clear before the boss area becomes stable again. Yeah. Okay. So, now that we have established all of these theories, we go to part 3 of our lecture. Are you still okay there? Hope things haven't been boring. Now I remember a game where I felt overwhelmed by a lot of mechanics. It's actually Neo. Neo. Yeah. The problem is if the game doesn't provide you with enough avenues to practice all of its mechanics, then competence is lessened. So it's not a good thing. You feel demotivated to play. Especially if, like I said, you're not given any opportunities to practice this other mechanic, and then all of a sudden, one boss requires that specific mechanic, right? We can't say that it's on the player. It's their fault for not practicing the mechanic. The game did not provide avenues to practice it. So, it's not the player's fault. At least part of the blame has to be shouldered by the game designer. Alright. Okay. Let's talk about player experience. This is what I have been advocating for from the very beginning. When we design games, we can start with the plot. In fact, MDA might suggest that we start with the mechanics. These are not bad starting points. But I feel like, at least in my opinion, And this is reflected by a lot of papers that I have read in game design, a lot of books that I have processed in game design, a lot of researchers that I have had the pleasure of interacting with in game design. It seems like a common consensus is, if not prioritizing, then at least paying attention to player experience can only be a good thing. So nowadays, when I talk to students who want to become good game designers and they have this idea of a game, they tell me, oh, it's going to be set in this universe. It's going to have all of these fantastic mechanics inspired by Genshin, inspired by Star Rail, inspired by Super Mario Brothers or whatever else, right? What I ask them first is, so what's the intended player experience here? What do you want your players to experience? If they're unable to answer that question, I urge them to pause their design of the plot, their design of their mechanics. I urge them to pause that for a while, set that aside, and focus first. Focus first on the player experience goals that they have. It's important that this is set early into development. Oh god, I'm losing my mouse. A game inspired by Genshin. It's like those Souls-like that one YouTuber keeps finding on Steam. Player experience, in my opinion, means you gotta make sure the game feels really good to play. In a rhythm game, it means the default binding must be comfortable. Okay. Taka, thank you for mentioning that. We'll talk about that, okay? There's like a few gems, but more are like So, talk about player experience. Player experience is obviously it's what the player feels when they play the game. While it's the game that induces the experiences, it's ultimately the player who lives through the specific experience. All I'm trying to say here is player experience is a very personal and individual matter, which makes it very tricky to engineer. It makes it tricky to design, right? This is something that a lot of seasoned game designers keep saying. We cannot dictate what the players will do, and therefore we cannot dictate and we should not dictate what the players are supposed to experience. However, this does not mean that we cannot set boundaries on what play experiences are desirable and what are not, right? So imagine creating a horror game, but because of certain design decisions, instead of feeling terrified, instead of feeling mortified, your players just laugh at the things that's happening in the game. For example, there is an Alien game, not Alien Isolation, the one that came before it, where the monster of the game has really poor AI. It doesn't really do what it's supposed to do, and it ends up being funnier than actually being scary. So that is... I have to admit though, that's more of a bug. The bug causes undesirable play experiences, but should have been tested before being released, right? So it doesn't induce undesirable play experiences. Horror game, but it's funny. It doesn't mean that we cannot have comedy in our horror games, but what is the intended player experience at the end of the day? Is it meant to be a campy, funny horror game? Or is it meant to be something that's really scary, mortifying? It's something that will keep them up at night, right? So, how do we define play experience? Now, first we must look at the connection of play experience and user experience. Is it security breach? So, player experience, when we say play experience, it refers to the experiences of players when they play games. User experience, on the other hand, refers to the experiences of users when they make use of software. Now, the two concepts are related. The concept of player experience actually draws from the concept of user experience. User experience, on the other hand, draws from principles of software engineering. Now, the thing is, right? The thing is, games, at the end of the day, is also software. That means, or at least some of them are software. That means it's easy to see how user experience and player experience are related to each other. Now, in the same way that the two terms are related, usability, the term usability, is often confused with user experience. So, usability talks about the technological affordances of software. Sorry for the deep terminology. What that simply means is, what does the software allow me to do? Does it allow me to, for example, open a save file? Does it allow me to scroll up and down a long list of words, of paragraphs? Does it allow me to close the application, right? Does it allow me to go from the login screen to the order page in 3 or less clicks? Those are all usability related concepts. User experience, on the other hand, talks about, does the software give me feedback in a second or less? Does it feel snappy? When I click a button, the software immediately takes me to the page that I want to be in. When I type a keyword, does it immediately show me all relevant items related to said keyword? So you see, this talks about your experience. It becomes frustrating if the software doesn't do that. For example, do you still remember software wizards? When you want to do a very long process, you invoke a wizard and you go through each step one at a time. Some wizards don't have a cancel or a back button, and it feels very frustrating to use them because you will be in the middle of the process when you realize, wait, I made a mistake. Do I have to start all over again? Do I have to close this wizard and start all over again? So, while usability talks about technological affordances, user experience actually talks about the individual experience of the user. And yeah, usability affects user experience, but that is not the end-all be-all of user experience. In the same way, playability is often confused with player experience. Is the controls clunky? That's a playability issue. If it's a rhythm game, are the buttons too spread apart that I can't press them in time? That's a playability issue as well. Is the timing of the rhythm snappy, or is there a delay? Can I set the latency? Can I add a delay intentionally so that because my keyboard has longer latency than other keyboards, I'd still be able to hit the notes on time? These are all playability related concepts. Player experience, on the other hand, is more rich. It's more deep. Is the rhythm game even fun in the first place? Is the story compelling? Is the game addicting? Right? So that's the difference. I guess the way Genshin made the UI for the earlier rhythm game events is more on the UI side. Yeah, the earlier rhythm games for Genshin has relatively poorer playability compared to the more recent Genshin rhythm game. But I would hazard to say that their player experience is relatively the same. The player experience didn't change that much. The playability did. It became better, but the experience is relatively the same. Like, the first one was a little more frustrating, but not by much. I hated how the lines were curved. On the other hand, I actually did enjoy that, so I think it made it quite unique. Although it is kind of frustrating. Like, the timing is a little frustrating sometimes because, am I supposed to press it now? Yeah. So, there's a difference between usability, user experience, and the difference between playability? and player experience. Does it make sense? So be careful when discussing either. You might confuse one for the other. So again, playability and game usability refer to the technological level. Player experience, on the other hand, denotes the individual and personal experience of playing games. So how do we even define player experience? How do we talk about desired play experience? How do we talk about desired aesthetic experiences? Is there a vocabulary that we could use to talk about this? Because it seems very important, but at the end of the day, if it's just, oh, I want a game that's fun, that's not detailed enough, right? Is there a language that we can use? Yes, there is. In fact, we can use the language proposed as early as 2004 in the MDA framework. Okay? So, we could use the 8-axis or 8-spectrum descriptor of Unique et al. In their MDA framework. Right? So, think of these 8 items as their own individual spectra. You could be low or high in any of the 8. And that would be fine. That's how you describe your play experience. So, sensation, for example, is about sense pleasure. So, is the visuals appealing? Is the audio calming to the ears, right? So, that's sensation. Fantasy talks about the make-believe aspect of the game. Are you in high fantasy RPG or are you more on the abstract level? Rhythm games tend to be more on the abstract level unless you include some sort of lore. Then it becomes more on the other spectrum of fantasy. Narrative is all about having drama, the dramatic arc. Is there a sense of drama in the game that you want to make? Challenge talks about the obstacles. Is your game tailored more for hardcore players or is it tailored more for casual players? Fellowship talks about the social framework that the game evokes. Will your game have multiplayer? Would you provide enough story hooks that players could then talk about later when they're done playing your game? Discovery talks about your game as an uncharted territory. Do you have avenues for discovering new sights, new sounds, new experiences? It doesn't have to be world exploration. It could be exploration of combination of mechanics. In a rhythm game, for example, in early levels, you have the basic notes, but maybe in later levels, you could include holds and various different combinations of holds and other types of buttons. Expression, game as self-discovery. Does your game allow its players to have their own builds, to have their own play styles? Can they express themselves through your games? Right? Baldur's Gate, for example, allows me to customize certain characters, change their jobs. This all speaks to the amount of self-expression I can have while playing Baldur's Gate. Finally, submission is a funny term, but ultimately what it means is the game addicting? Is the game meant to be addicting? Do you submit your time to the game? So, let's talk about let's look at an example, no? Let's talk about the aesthetics of Genshin Impact following the 8-axis spectrum of the MDA framework. So in terms of sensation, Genshin Impact has bright and cheerful audio and visuals. Generally, of course, there are darker cases. Genshin is such a huge game. So the audio and visuals are bright and cheerful most of the time, but it peppers in enough of the opposite to keep you craving the bright and cheerful audio and visuals. It provides enough variety. The fantasy of Genshin Impact is you're placed in a world of martial magic. You're allowed to fight with swords and bows and weapons, but you also have magic spells that you could cast. Magical abilities. There are deities and kingdoms and so much high fantasy tropes. Well, fantasy tropes in general. The narrative is, well, you're looking for your sibling, and that explains almost all of the actions that you take in the game. Challenge is made more for casual players. Genshin is not meant to be difficult. And then in terms of fellowship, there are multiplayer modes, and the game also fosters sharing of experiences. Hoyoverse actually does a good job of this. People are encouraged to share their experiences with each other. The story beats are easy to narrate to other people, so you could debate and talk about your experiences in game. In terms of discovery, well, Genshin does this well as well. You are in a world with a lot to explore. Cities themed after different cultures. Genshin also supports different playstyles. Not necessarily a lot of different playstyles, but it supports enough. I would say it's a little more... you're allowed to have a little more self-expression in terms of builds in Genshin compared to, say, League of Legends nowadays, where you tend to be shoehorned into particular builds. And finally, yes, Genshin is meant to be addicting. It offers incentives for daily play and offers incentives for continuous play. So, for submission, it is meant to be addicting. So, yeah, if we are going to design our own games, it is important that we know, or at least we find a way to express the aesthetic experiences that we want our players to have when they play our games. This allows us to define player experience as early as at the very beginning of the game. We can commit to these player experiences so that when we think about the mechanics, we think of them as a way to support the aesthetic experiences. So the idea here is, depending on how mechanics are designed and balanced, they can reinforce some player experiences, but they could be detrimental to other play experiences. Now, this is one of the topics where if we have a part 2, I might focus on this. There's so much we can talk about game mechanics. Oh my gosh. It's one of the topics that I love to talk about. I'll give you like a bit of a teaser for game mechanics in tonight's class, but oh gosh, if we can have a part 2, we can have 1, 2, maybe 3 sessions just focused on game mechanics. But let's talk about game mechanics as let's summarize it this way. There is a theory that says game mechanics could be viewed as some sort of an economy. There are entities that accumulate resources, and these resources could be moved around among different entities. These resources could be created out of thin air. They could be completely destroyed without a trace. They could be converted from one form to another. They could be traded with each other. The idea is they're not... So when you convert, you destroy the original resource and then you produce something new. When we talk about trading, nothing is destroyed. The resources are simply exchanged. Okay? Now, if we start thinking this way, we could start viewing... This one could be a bit of a leap. Again, apologies. I wanted to have more time with this one, but maybe if we have a part 2. Okay? The blue and orange assets, etc. Yeah, that's one example of conversion, right? If we have more time, we could go more deeply into this. This is one of the topics that I really am passionate about. But anyway, I hope we're able to at least imagine mechanics this way. So let's have an example. In a fighting game, let's say, right? In a fighting game, you have several resources that are pretty obvious. Your life total is a resource. The timer of the round is a resource. The rage meter is a resource. The special meter is a resource. Those are resources, but we could also consider the space between players as a resource. We could consider the amount of damage you could deal in any given combo as a resource. Basically, anything that could be expressed as a number in a game could be considered a resource. Now, when your character moves closer to an enemy character, you trade the resource of space with the resource of threat, right? Imagine two opposing characters in a fighting game, you approach the other character, right? You're approaching them, you're moving closer. So, you're trading the resource of space. You're losing space, but you're increasing threat. The closer you are, the more damage you could deal, right? Of course, it depends from character to character, but generally speaking, if you move in close, there's a higher chance of you to be able to deal damage. So you're trading space for threat, right? The moment you start attacking, you are trading threat because you're now when you attack, when you punch, for example, you lose threat kasi your opponent can block your attack and then now you're open. So you're trading threat for damage. If it's improperly timed, that threat is instead traded to damage to yourself because your opponent is able to block. Okay? You see the dynamic now of thinking of numeric values in game as resources. Yeah? So, since we have seen possibilities of trading and creating and destroying and converting resources, we can start viewing them as economies. Diba? In an economy, in an economic system, you can buy goods from other people. You could trade your money for something else. Of course, in real economies, you can't really destroy resources. It's just converted. But the idea is, if you're able to think of game mechanics as economies, then we can start looking at feedback loops that mechanics reinforce. Pwede ko naman ilublob yung 1K sa tuloy. I mean, yeah, but you still have the 1K. To be fair, you could, I guess, burn your bills or whatever. So, if mechanics are viewed as economies, we can start thinking of mechanics as causes for feedback loops. And in mechanic design, in game mechanic design, we consider 3 different types of feedback loops. We'll only be discussing 2 tonight. The first is called the positive feedback loop. Now, what is a positive feedback loop? It happens when a mechanic punishes losers and rewards winners. The idea is winners win more and losers lose more. And you might be wondering, why have mechanics like that? That's unfair. Well, mechanics like these actually produce arms race situations where competition is now incentivized, right? It might seem unfair at first, but without these mechanics, without positive feedback loops, there is no incentive for players to compete against each other. But once they figure out that, a positive feedback loop is happening here, if I lose, I'm gonna lose more. So now you're incentivized to compete. Now you're incentivized to be a little bit more cutthroat. That's the consequence of me not competing. Okay, let me compete now. Right? It gives urgency to your game. Strong positive feedback loops could also cause the players to win quickly. See, if your winners are being rewarded and your losers are being punished, your losers would not have a chance to catch up. So the winners would just end the game quickly, right? Think of League of Legends when someone gets so many kills that they have such a high gold advantage that the opponent, the losers, can't keep up anymore, right? I would say even that the general gold system of League of Legends is a positive feedback loop. The losers, whenever, for example, 2 characters fight in League of Legends and one loses the fight, the loser is punished. They have to walk all the way back to lane. They will lose CS. They would lose gold opportunities. And then the winner gets rewarded because they have sole control of the lane. They could push the lane so that your creeps, the creeps of the winner, will just be eaten up by the opponent's tower, right? top lane moment. Yeah, I probably am referring to top lane moments. So that is a positive feedback loop. And we see so many examples of these in games, right? It seems unfair at first, but again, if we don't have this, then we don't have anything to force players to take action. Players won't have the urgency to take action. Also, we need positive feedback loops because we want our players to feel strong, right? Feeling strong in games make us feel good. So we have to reward it by enforcing a little bit of positive feedback loops here and there. Okay? So let's talk about its opposite now, the negative feedback loop. Negative feedback loops are not, because often we confuse the negative feedback loop as losers being punished. Losers being punished, winners being rewarded. This is all positive feedback loop, right? Positive feedback loop amplifies. Positive feedback loop reinforces. It reinforces victory. It amplifies losing. Negative feedback loop, on the other hand, forces an equilibrium. Forces a draw between entities of a game. If it's player versus player, a negative feedback loop mechanic would force a balance. Force things to come to an equilibrium. Winners win less, losers lose less. Negative feedback loops resist change and forces the game into an equilibrium state. Think of the bounty system in League of Legends. Think of the catch-up mechanics in Mario Kart or some racing games, right? These are negative feedback loops. They reward losers so they feel like they could still catch up. So, just like positive feedback loops, negative feedback loops could still lead to 10 situations, but the 10 situation is a little bit different. It makes players feel like they are capable of catching up and fighting back. They give players hope, essentially. Blue shell, bane of my existence. The blue shell is a strong example of a negative feedback loop. You only get blue shell if you are in the back of the line, right? The leader in Mario Kart cannot get blue shell. So, negative feedback loop forces equilibrium and it also prolongs games. So, for example, the bounty system of League of Legends help prolong games because it helps the losers catch up. Okay? Does it make sense? Again, if we're given more time, oh my gosh, I could talk at length about positive and feedback loops. We could look at more examples. So if you want a part 2, just let me know. Let me know if you want a part 2 of this game mechanics class. I will be more than willing. This is a topic that I really love to talk about. So, mechanic design is a rabbit hole that we simply do not have the time to discuss today. All I'm saying is mechanics influence aesthetic experiences. So, if you wish to learn more, here's a book recommendation from me. Game Mechanics Advanced Game Design by Adams and Dormans. Okay? In summary, game mechanics influence aesthetic experiences. Certain mechanics, depending on the type of feedback loop it reinforces, results in specific types of player experience. Sige, you know what? Let's have a part 2. I'll schedule it. When we go to part 2, what I would like to reinforce there are mechanics and what type of player experience do they induce. The book of Adams and Dormans actually has a list of game mechanics distilled into their absolute essence, removing all of the aesthetic elements, removing plot elements, removing graphic elements, and just focusing on the mechanics themselves. Their book has a list of that, and then that list also maps the mechanic with the type of experience that it induces. Things like a slow engine, for example. A slow engine is just an engine that produces resources slowly over time. It's static. It doesn't really increase or decrease. It gives a sense of slow progression. It makes players feel like they're not gonna be out of any resources. So it causes them to be a little more exploratory, that they would like to explore more because they're gonna get resources eventually anyway. It's not like they're not going to get resources. Okay, so there's more of that in the Book of Adams and Dormans. If we have a part 2, let's talk about that there. All right. Last chapter of tonight is actually the shortest of the chapters. Again, if we have a part 2, or a part 3 even, we can spend multiple sessions on just this part. This is now what happens. So after you have decided on your player experience, what's next? What can we do? Let's talk about Tracy Fullerton's iterative approach. Tracy Fullerton is another seasoned game designer, and she proposes this iterative approach in the design of games. So what is it? Fullerton simply states that at all phases, at all stages of game design, we must follow these 4 steps. Generate an idea, formalize it by writing it down or doing something to make it codified, document it, create a prototype out of it, create a plan out of the idea. The point is, once you have formalized the idea, you can test it, right? You can't test an idea that's just floating in someone's head. It must be turned into something that's testable. It must be made tangible. Otherwise, how can you test it? It's in someone's mind. You just interview them. So what do you have in mind? So they'll tell you, okay, this is what I have in mind. And then you try to test it on the spot. You know what? What if this is what happens? Then the person on the other side will then say, oh, let me modify it then to this and that and this and that. And then all of a sudden, you lose track of what you're discussing, right? So the idea must first be codified or formalized before it could be tested. And then finally, the results of the testing could be evaluated. If the result is desirable, then you add that to your design. You add that to your game. If it's not desirable, then you could either discard it completely or dissect the undesirable result and find if there's anything there you could salvage, which you could use to generate more ideas again. Now, this is not the whole process of game design. Actually, it looks more like this. So, in a professional studio, there are 3 or 4 phases. You begin with the concept phase, and then the pre-production, where the concept is refined further, and then the production phase, where the game is actually developed, and then the post-production or QA phase, where after the game has been developed, you test it, you market it, and then eventually you launch the game. More modern games follow a slightly different process. After launch, there might be more things that you could do because now we have games as a service. But what I would like you to focus on is, I hope you could see it. Notice how there is a spiral that contains the 4 steps. Generate, formalize, test, evaluate. Generate, formalize, test, evaluate. Do you see the spiral? Because that's what happens when you develop your game. You're always generating new ideas, formalizing it, testing it, evaluating, and then revising, and then going back to generation, evaluation, codification, testing, evaluation, and it goes in a spiral until you're done. Every phase of production would see this iterative spiral of idea generation, idea formalization, idea testing, and result evaluation. Okay? Yeah. Now, a few things I'd like to say about game development. There are 2 best practices: prototyping and playtesting. It makes sense that in the design of games, we play the game often. This is playtesting. Playing the game in its different stages and evaluating how it plays is called playtesting. And this is the best way to assess how well the game works. Each playtest must answer a specific playtest question. Again, this is one of those things where we could go in depth. There's even a mathematical model to view playtesting. Simply put, it's like this, no? It's hard to predict how players would react to your game. So, given a game, you cannot immediately determine the type of reactions your players would get. So it's not a function. It's not a mathematical function. Sorry, I'm using math here. So if it's not a mathematical function, then what can we do? The best thing we can do is to have players actually test the game so we could see how they react. And then from how they react, we make adjustments and then we test again. It just makes sense to develop games like this. Okay? Now, we cannot play test without first creating a prototype. Now, there are many different misconceptions about prototypes, but the biggest misconception I see, right? Every time I teach game design or any version of game design, one of the biggest misconceptions in prototyping I see is that students tend to keep their prototypes and students tend to continue development on their prototypes. That shouldn't be the case. A prototype should be meant to be thrown away. After you've done your playtesting, after you've answered your playtest question through the game prototype, you're meant to throw away the prototype. Prototypes are meant to be very quickly altered, very quickly modified, and you don't develop any sort of emotional attachment to the prototype, right? Its sole purpose is to be tested. Once a question, once the playtest question has been answered, throw away the prototype, right? You don't iterate on a prototype. You iterate on your build, on your game build. You don't iterate on a prototype. That's meant to be disposed. Paano kung may attachment issues? It's a skill. 100%. Sorry, I know that you're joking, but that's a very important question, Kira. In a lot of professional applications of creative skills, we have to learn to not be too attached with our work. If you're an artist working in a creative industry, that's one of the first things you learn. You detach yourself from your art because your boss would tell you, oh, revise this, change it to this, change it to that. If you're too attached with your art, right? You'd feel insulted. Sometimes even at a personal level, that your boss tells you this, tells you that. You're not the one who drew this. How can you tell me that that's... But remember, your boss is essentially your client in these situations. You have to adapt to what they want you to make because that might be what's more needed. Who knows, right? So yeah, don't fall in love with your ideas. That is indeed rule zero in any creative industry, right? At the end of the day, when you are in a creative industry, as harsh as it sounds, as soulless as it sounds, as inhuman as it sounds, the goal is to make money. You're in an industry, you're in a business. Your goal is to make money. And sometimes what makes money does not coincide with what you think is good, what you think is proper. So you must be able to let go. May isa akong artist na sinabihan ako na such is the life of an artist when I had to tell him his work wasn't accepted. Di ko alam kung he feels bad ba ako or what. Don't be. I feel like that artist probably knows that, hey, this is just how the creative industry works. There were like concepts in making video games that were thrown away mid-development now that I think about it. Yeah. If it really doesn't work, don't be too attached with the mechanics. Sometimes we're so engrossed in mechanics that we think that it's really the way to go. It feels like this is gonna be fun, right? But again, we can't dictate what is fun for our players. We can't dictate that. That's a personal and individual experience. It's all completely up to the player, right? So if it doesn't appeal to them, if it doesn't work for them, even if you think that it's gonna be fun, if the playtest says no, then you have to learn to let go. Yeah? It was a week's worth of effort. Here's the thing. Yes, that's devastating because like I spent so much effort working on this. But at the same time, again, as harsh as it sounds, I don't want to sound inhuman. Of course, I appreciate and I feel bad for the fact that it's an entire week's worth of effort down the drain essentially. But it's not completely down the drain. The artist probably learned a lot for taking that 1 week worth of effort. Maybe when you ask them to revise, it will only take them a few days now because they already know what to do, right? At the end of the day, the pieces we produce are just products. What matters more is the things that we learn along the way, because that allows us to replicate the products, to produce more of the products, to iterate on the products, to make the products better. Right? Yeah, lots of cut content, cut stories. Tinan ko na lang ng underwater combat. Yeah. This is, by the way, different from features that were removed in older versions of the game, and then the new version of the game doesn't have it anymore. So yeah, underwater combat in Monster Hunter, or mega evolutions in Pokemon. That's a different thing. It's not the content. It's not the type of cut content that we're referring to here. What we're referring to here are content that doesn't really work while you're developing the game. After a playtest, it seems like the mechanic's not fun, it's not inducing the desired play experience, so we cut them. Okay? In summary, and this is a very hand-wavy summary, I'm sorry, but yeah. We'll have a part 2, 100%. I think we ought to have a part 2. Game design and development is done in 3 major phases: pre-production, post-production, pre-production, production, and post-production. Sometimes there's a 4th phase, the initial conception phase. But in each phase, the iterative approach of idea generation, codification, testing, and evaluation must be employed. And yeah, that is the end of today's game design class. I know, bitin, but we have been going at it for several hours now. And research also says that no matter how engaging you think you are, your audience tends to zone out eventually after several hours of lecture. So we ought to stop here, and then maybe we can do a part 2. If we get lots of positive feedback from tonight's stream, we'll have a part 2. Why not? I love doing this anyway. I mean, I've always said that I love my job outside of streaming. It's a great class. Thank you so much. Aki7, thank you so much. I do love teaching, but I feel like recently my work has been quite demanding, quite challenging, so I tend to feel a little burned out. But doing this on stream combines the two things that I love. Currently, I love streaming and I also love to teach. So, gosh, I feel kind of emotional, but just having the opportunity to do the two things that I love together, why would I say no? So if you want another part, let's do another part. We'll schedule it because this takes time to prepare for. Like, for example, I've been preparing these slides for the past 2 days, but the content is something that I've been thinking of for the past few weeks. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Aki7. So, give me some time. I'll prep the next part of the lesson, and then we'll have another game design class in the near future, hopefully not in the far future. But there's one more thing that I owe you. There's another class that I owe you, the calculus class. I kind of dread putting that as one of the sub goals, but hey, like I said before, Sensei does not back down from a challenge. So that's the next class we're gonna be having. Not anytime, well, hopefully sometime soon, but I need to prepare for it. So if not next week, then the week after, we'll have the calculus class. I hope you're still interested in that. That's very math related. But I also like calculus. I feel like calculus is such an underappreciated topic. Oh boy. F for the calculus class. I feel like calculus is such an underappreciated topic and it has so many applications. But because I don't want to say it's taught in a wrong way, but because the focus is more on the formulas and not a lot of time probably was spent establishing why calculus is the way that it is, I feel like we missed the point. It's such a beautiful concept, at least in my opinion. I don't think I remember what I learned from high school. Oh my gosh. We never learned calculus in school, so I would like to learn it a bit. Okay, good, good, good. To give you a bit of a teaser, here's how I usually explain calculus. If I only had 30 seconds to explain calculus, here's how I would explain it. Algebra is the math of static things, right? So the idea is when you solve for x, right? So you have a formula, you solve for x. You're solving the value for x for that one frozen snapshot in time. Later, when you solve the formula, you're gonna get the same value of x. Tomorrow, when you solve the formula, you're still gonna get the same value of x. If you change the value of other variables, the process is still just for that one snapshot in time. One combination of values results in that value for x, right? It's a static mathematics, and it's useful for a lot of things. If you just want to measure, for example, right? For example, you want a table that is 4 times as long as it is wide. So you measure how wide the table might be, and then you multiply it by 4 to measure how long it will be. Sometimes that's all that you need. That's the mathematics that you need. You just want to know if that table would fit your room, because your room can accommodate a table that's 4 times as long as it is wide, right? That's all the math that you need. Sometimes, however, you need mathematics in motion. What happens if that value of x is changing over time? How do we make sense of that? Do we calculate every single value of x for every second that passes? Every time that the value of x changes, we recalculate for it? That would be kind of unwieldy. It's possible, but be kind of unwieldy. What if we just observe the pattern with which the value of x changes? That is calculus. What if biglang nagparamdam yung x mo? I mean, what if? None of my previous profs told me about this. Now some stuff comes into picture, and blame my old prof. Hey, don't blame the old profs. Blame more the education system, right? Because we're meant to reach learning outcomes within like a short span of time, and so we're not given enough time to explore. We're not given enough time to have the concept sink in. The really amazing profs could probably do this, but not everyone could be amazing teachers, right? Their professions, their passions might lie elsewhere. So you really can't blame them. We have to, if there's anything to blame, it's the faulty education system, I think. I wish education systems would allow us to explore more so we could experience more, and we could really have what we learn sink in. Because right now, the learning is more or less surface level because we're not given enough time to truly absorb what we're learning. Right? I'm really interested in calculus. I really never understood what I was doing, and I used to only memorize formulas and methods. See? That's a problem. Do you understand why, for example, when you derive a certain formula, you get another formula? What's derivation? Why am I deriving? What? What was not told to you probably was when you do derivation in calculus, the new formula that you come up with describes how the value of a variable, most likely x, the value of x changes in the original formula. It's the pattern that the value of x would follow. So we will have time to discuss this in the calculus class. I do not aim to go too deep into calculus. What I aim to do is to establish more and to gain an appreciation more of what calculus is all about. The rest of it kasi is something that you could learn by yourself. The rules, for example, the derivation rules, that's something that you could learn by yourself. Once you understood why you're doing certain things, once you've gained a significant amount of appreciation for what you're doing. So that's my goal for the calculus class. I hope I'm able to do that. Calculus is not an easy topic to teach, but it's something that I also really like. So hopefully I do a good job. We never really were taught what the formulas are used for. All we get is, here's the formula, use it. Yeah, that's a problem. That's a problem, right? Like for example, let's not even go into calculus. The equation of a line. What even is the equation of a line? Why are we taught the equation of a line? What is y equals mx plus b? What is that about? Yeah, m is slope, but what is it about? So if you really look it up though, a line is what happens when you plot all possible values of x, all possible values of y given a moving value of x. Right? So keep giving ever increasing values of x. The formula of a line will give you different y coordinates. You plot these xy coordinates, you connect these dots, you form a line. That's all it is. Hindi ko pa rin alam bakit bumili si Bob ng 50 na watermelons tapos kailangan ko i-solve. And we always hear arguments of we're not gonna use this in the future anyway. That's also a sad thing because I do not think, in my opinion at least, sorry, this might be controversial, but I do not think that the utility of a formula should dictate whether or not it is to be taught in the classroom. Even formulas that we won't find use for is important to be taught in the classroom if, right? If it uncovers, if it reveals important truths, right? Because if we're only focusing on the quote-unquote practical formulas, then yeah, we're gonna be able to do stuff in practice. But if we need to customize the formulas, how can we do that if we don't understand the deeper mathematics behind it? So I do think that the utility of a topic should not dictate whether or not it is to be taught in class. There's a reason why some formulas, quote-unquote, we don't use in real life is still being taught in the classroom. Uy, nagamit ko yung physics formula for winning. Oh, see? Yeah. Like I told my coworker, I think algebra teaches you how to think logically. It's not just about finding x. Yeah. It's not all about finding your x. I mean, finding x. Okay. Whew. I think that was a successful stream tonight. I have no idea how I'm going to end it though. Usually when we play games, we go back to the classroom, but we're already in the classroom. How do you usually end streams like this? You know what? Let's go back to the classroom anyway. Now, usually when I stream, I have this, not really rule, but I have this practice of playing at least one ukulele song just so I could practice my ukulele playing. So, are you interested in that? I don't have much of a voice left, so we'll pick something easy. But just so I could practice, shall we play one ukulele song and then I'll dismiss all of you? Wow, dismiss. Pro teacher. I don't know the chords yet to Raining in Manila. I've been trying to learn it. It's difficult. Oh my gosh, is it difficult? We will have karaoke anyway this Saturday, so it's inevitable that Raining in Manila will be brought up again in Saturday's karaoke. So let's reserve it for that. Okay? By the way, we are indeed in the middle of a subathon right now. So let's bring back the timer and everything. Shall I show you our sub goals? So currently we are this is the continuation of the August subathon. I decided to continue it all the way into September because September is my birth month. My birthday was last week, the 19th. So I said, yeah, you know what? Let's just extend the subathon. We managed to beat our goal last time, and I don't mind if we don't beat the goal this time around. I really don't mind. You really don't have to sub or anything. Just you being around in the goofy things that we do on stream is more than enough for me. But just so you know, this is our sub goals for this month for September's subathon. We're currently at 58. So at some point, I'll do a poll on what PFP you would like me to use on Twitter. At 60, we'll do you get to design a free emote. We'll all collaborate on a design for a free emote. And then at 65 subs and 70 subs, this is D&D related. We create D&D character sheets for the people of Moteki U, the faculty of Moteki U. And then we will have a Moteki U D&D night at 70 subs. At 75, we release a cover of Raining in Manila. At 80, we do a plastic model hand cam stream. At 85, we'll do a stream where I try to draw Moteki U people from memory, Moteki U faculty from memory. At 90, we play a horror game. I hate horror games, by the way. I do hope that we never reach 95. It's almost done. It's almost the end of September anyway. I'm pretty sure we won't make it there. So, whew, I think I'm safe. At 95 subs, I've been planning to have merch released for some time now. I know it's a bit ambitious. How presumptuous. This guy with only this many followers already releasing merch. But you know, I did set it as one of my New Year goals to be able to sell at least one thing that is Moteki U related or Sensay Moteki related. So if I make it to 95, we'll release the merch early. And then at 100 subs, we'll do a cooking hand cam. Yeah, so September is about to end. No horror games. Yay. No one sub anymore, please. So we don't have to do the horror game. Anyway, those are the sub goals, the extended sub goals, the stretch goals essentially for the month of September. But again, I would like to re-emphasize, please do not sub. If you don't have any extra money, spend on yourself first. I know you have lots of wants. Please do not sub, okay? It's not required. It's not required at all. Here's the thing. Even though they are sub goals, eventually I might do them anyway. Further into the future, of course. We're just expediting that by making it a sub goal. Okay? So no need to sub. If you can't or if you want to spend on yourself more, do that. Please, don't spend it on me. I really want to save for a new PC. Exactly. Right? Ginastos ko na for Cosmania, see? I do know my audience, so I understand why subbing might not be a thing that you can do, and I really, really, really do not mind. Please, I don't mind at all. If I could ask you though for a favor, the only favor I would ask is do tell your friends about the stream. It is my dream to eventually be able to reach 1,000 followers. I know it's like not that lofty of a dream, but I don't know. The number 1,000 is important to me. Hence why it's a pin on my sweater vest. Do you see it? It says 1,000 on my sweater vest. Yeah. Cosmania concert ticket pain. I know, right? Oh, come on. I wanted to go day 2, but it was immediately sold out. So I'm not going to Cosmania anymore. But yeah, if there's a favor I could ask of you, do share the stream with your friends. Ask them to follow, ask them to watch. I mean, I try my best to provide some form of entertainment every evening. We also do a lot of collabs in this channel, so you know, if you want to witness the craziness of Moteki University, then stick around. Tomorrow, for example, we'll have a collab because tomorrow is another sub-goal stream. We managed to make it to, I forgot the milestone, but since we reached that milestone, tomorrow we will have a Magic the Gathering handcam stream. So we'll be playing with a few of my friends from Moteki University in tomorrow's handcam stream. Okay, so look forward to that. I'm actually looking forward to it. I love playing Magic the Gathering, and so I'm looking forward to having this handcam stream. Yeah. So that's tomorrow. What else? On Saturday, we have another 2-parter. The early part of the stream will be for karaoke. And then at around 8-ish p.m., we will have the next episode of the Moteki University podcast. What's the title of this one? Nostalgic Nutmeg, I think. This will be with Halsonaros and I am Kaido. Speaking of which, let me shout out my friends in Moteki U. which I do hope that you would also follow. Um, my fellow quarter pounders, Hal Sonaros, of course Hal would at this point in time, Hal would say in the background, official name is the Pioneers, but I prefer the name Quarter Pounders. It's funnier. So follow my fellow Quarter Pounders, Hal Sonaros and Kira Rin. Kira is still here. Kira, are you still there? I don't know if you're still there. Maybe you dozed off already. It is quite late. Go follow them. Let me can you give them shout outs, Manisan Chloe? Manisan Chloe, could you give them shout outs? So who else do I promote? Also follow Ayame Kaido. Ayame Kaido is also part of Moteki University. And then who else? Poltergeist, O1, so many people. These are all of my friends. We're all in Moteki U. Are we a VTuber agency? Not really. Will we be a VTuber agency? Maybe. I don't know. But we are a VTuber group. And all of these people I'm mentioning are very close friends. Who else? Panda Afros is also in Moteki University. So go follow Panda Afros as well. Ayaw ng bot kay Ayame. So sad. There you go. Follow Ayame Kaido as well. Who else in Moteki U? Let me give a... Okay, let me do this time. So whenever I end my stream, I'm gonna, of course, shout out. Oh yeah! Diwa is also in Moteki U, so go follow Diwa. Moving forward, I will give direct shout outs to members of the Quarter Pounders and then to Ayame and Paul and yeah, the other deans of Moteki University. And then I'll highlight someone new, someone that I think deserves a follow but is currently still kinda small. So maybe for tonight, I have mentioned several people already. You have Diwa over there. Who else did I mention already? Panda, I've mentioned also. There's one member of Moteki U that we want to see eventually reach affiliate. Their name is Dairy. Oh my gosh, the collab with Dairy was so fun. So go follow Dairy as well. So tonight's highlight of the night. Wow. Steamer VTuber highlight of the night goes to Dairy. We wanted to raid Dairy yesterday, but for some reason Twitch was not allowing me to raid, which is super annoying. Anyway, go follow Dairy. There you go. Let's do that now. There's so many friends now in Moteki U that I can't possibly shout them out all in one go. So I'll just highlight one each stream. I hope that's okay with everyone. But they're all my friends, so do follow them. Do follow them as well. Friends and occasional collab mates too. I collab with them. Okay. Shall we do one ukulele song before we go? Shall we go with a classic? Because we've discussed so many classic theories tonight. What if we play a classic ukulele song for Filipino VTuber? Let me see if you could hear my ukulele. You'll be able to hear it. Let me turn off the BGM as well. So you don't hear the BGM. Let me bring out my ukulele. Where is my ukulele? There you go. Jajong, 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 jajong. Okay. Tell me if you could hear the ukulele. Mahina. Is it not that loud? Okay. We need to increase the gain a little bit so I can pick it up properly. Oop. Napuputol? So it's there's no noise cancellation, so I guess I just need to move this a little lower. And then move it a little further away. One more time. That time around. Was that good enough? Were you able to like hear it properly? Yeah, Oxna. Hey, let's go. So this is the classic VTuber anthem for Filipino VTubers. Of course, I play it my own way. Let me just take a sip of my oolong tea. I love me my oolong tea. Tonight's stream is not sponsored by oolong tea, but if it could be sponsored by oolong tea, that would be great. If you know of any oolong tea purveyors that's willing to give me a sponsorship, I would be super super happy for that. I love oolong tea. I don't put sugar in my oolong tea. I don't put anything on my oolong tea. It's just literal oolong tea. It's so good. I love it. So bitter. It reminds me of how bitter life could be. Wait, what? Right, let's go. This is Sana Ako Na Lang, a Filipino song by Millie Parfait and is the unofficial unofficial national anthem of all Filipino VTubers. Sana ako na lang, ba't kasi nandun ka sa kanya? Sana ako na lang, kasi mas bagay tayong dalawa. Bakit pa ko umaasa, kahit alam ko naman ang meron ka ng iba? Masaya ka naman sa piling niya. Sana ako na lang ang kausap mo tuwing hating gabi. Makasama kang kumain ng ice cream dun sa tabi. Sana ako na lang, oh please ako naman ay pansinin. Oh please naman, pansinin mo na ko please. Hay, sana ako na lang, ba't kasi nandun ka sa kanya? Sana ako na lang, kasi mas bagay tayong dalawa. Pero di naaasa, dahil alam ko naman ang meron ka ng iba. Sana'y masaya ka na sa piling niya. Ba't ako nagtatampo? Hindi naman tayo. Ba't ako nagsiselos? Kaibigan lang ang turing mo. Ba't ako nagtatampo? Mukha lang akong tanga. Ba't ako nagsiselos? Kasi mahal kita. Araw-araw tayong magkasama. Ang dami mong mixed signals, kaya ako'y umaasa. Pero sa huli, kaibigan lang pala. Kasi di naman ako special sa kanya, kaya di na ako magtatampo. Hindi naman tayo. Di na ako magsiselos, kaibigan lang naman ako. Di na ako magtatampo, ayokong maging tanga. Di na ako magsiselos, kahit mahal kita. Kahit mahal kita. Gago. There we go. There we go. How was that? How was that? Okay, let me hide the ukulele now. Let me hide the ukulele. And then let me reset everything back to normal. There you go. There you go. There you go. Bad trip pa rin yung kanta. I know, right? It's like so painful to listen to, isn't it? There you go. I'm still learning how to sing and how to properly play the ukulele. I think I'm getting better at it. So, yay! I should just keep up the practice, no? I should just keep practicing the ukulele, practice singing, practice playing. Anyway, speaking of practice, thank you everyone for joining the stream tonight. I so appreciate all of you. I really appreciate that you are all here. Thank you Aki7 for the follow. Thank you Sesbi also, Manisan Sesbi for the resub a while ago. And thank all of you, every single one of you are still tuning in right now even though we're already about to end the stream. I do hope that you keep becoming better and better versions of yourselves, and if you ever feel like there's no one appreciating your efforts, I appreciate it. I truly enjoy it. I am truly happy when I see my dear star students achieving beyond what they think they could achieve, right? But you don't have to achieve so high. Even a little bit of achievement is more than enough for me to be happy. Just knowing that you're putting the effort is already making me happy. It's already autotelic enough. Yo, I'm using the terms we used in class today. Let's go. Let's go look for someone to raid. Do you have any suggestions? Do you have anyone that you would like me to raid? Who's online tonight even? Who do we raid tonight? Who do we raid tonight? Who do we raid tonight? Do you have any raid requests? Anyone that you would like me to raid? Gosh, I do not like the fact that I have to use Chrome now to access Twitch because apparently the browser I'm using is no longer supported. Sushis. That's new. Okay, let me look up. Is that the name? That's how you spell the name? Ooh, Sushis. Let me see how many viewers they have. If the viewer count is a little too high. Oh my god, it's high. I am scared. I'm scared. You know what? If because you're new here, Aki7, and because you requested, sure, let's go raid Sushis. I don't mind. Let's go raid Sushis. I'm also gonna drop Sushis a follow. Go raid Sushis. How do you know Sushis, by the way, Aki7? Hopefully I'm not like misreading your name. I've been calling you Aki7 the entire time. I hope you're fine with me calling you Aki7. Let's go raid Sushis now. How do you know Sushis? No problem. Ah, your role model. I see. Okay, then all the more reason. Right? All the more reason. Sensay never backs down from a challenge unless the challenge is to raid Iron Mouse. No, I'm not gonna raid Iron Mouse. I know if Ayame is here, Ayame would always say, who do I raid? Ayame would say, Iron Mouse. No! Or we can raid Sushis. What's a raid message? What's a raid message? Now, we're raiding Sushis tonight. Not Iron Mouse. Not tonight. Eventually, I'll work up the courage. Again, I don't back down from a challenge, but that does not mean I have to do the challenge now, right? What's a raid message for Sushi? Game design class raid. Keep it simple for now because we do not know who. We're not a regular raider, I guess, from Sushis. Might be surprised with our raid message. So let's just use game design class raid. Challenge saved for a later day. Yes, you can count on that. Whew, am I shooting myself in the foot? Maybe. Is it okay? Yup. No problem. I do not enjoy being shot in the foot, but like I said, I do not back down from a challenge. Alright, let's go raid Sushis. Our raid message tonight is game design class raid. I'll see you all again tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll have the Magic the Gathering handcam stream. And hopefully I also get to see all of you on Saturdays. My stream usually starts at 8 p.m. Although tomorrow we will start at 10. because usually for Friday, it's so strong and cool. I mean, I try to be. Anyway, sorry. Anyway, tomorrow's stream will be at 10 p.m. GMT plus 8. Saturday stream will start at 6 p.m. GMT plus 8, but it tends to be a little flexible depending on my energy levels and how much work I had for that day. So, there you go. Like I always say, mo take care of the environment, mo take care of each other, and mo take care of yourselves. Sensayonara, everyone. Otsu Sensay. Bye-bye. I know. Let me set up the raid while we're in the goodbye screen. Sushis. They're playing Phasmo. Should I play Phasmo? I'm too afraid to play Phasmo. Maybe I shouldn't be playing Phasmo. I don't know. I'm too afraid. Take care as well, Aki7. Start the raid now. Go join the raid. We're raiding Sushis. Go show our support as well to Sushis. If you haven't followed, go follow Sushis. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye. Sensayonara, Otsu Sensei. Bye-bye.